All right, let's get it. Friday Drive, what's going on? It's about 12 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. A little sunshine on a Friday. It's chilly, though. It's going to be a chilly weekend, but not a lot of rain or snow in the forecast, at least down here in the benches. Hopefully, we'll get a little snow up in the mountains as we have officially turned our calendars to November. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That young man is Porter Larson behind the glass. We got a good show, man. We got a lot to do. We got a really good guest list to kind of dissect and discuss everything that's going on locally and nationally. Of course, BYU and Utah on buys this week, and we have one eye to next Saturday for the rivalry game up here in Salt Lake City, 8:15 Mountain Time on Saturday night. Porter will have you taken care of live from our tailgate up on Guardsman's Way starting at 4:15. So that's kind of still the big storyline, but there's a lot of college football this weekend, kind of a sneaky good college football weekend, and some Big 12 implications at stake as the contenders continue to try to separate themselves from the pack. There's still 4 or 5, maybe even 6 teams alive in the Big 12 that could potentially win the whole thing. And if you're a BYU fan, you certainly have your eye on what Iowa State has in front of them at Jack Trice Stadium in Ames, Iowa. Iowa State's a healthy favorite. This game is sneaky. They welcome in Texas Tech. K-State's on the road against Houston. Arizona is in Orlando against UCF. It's going to be Arizona State and Oklahoma State. Arizona State is a 4-point favorite in Stillwater. Oklahoma State still trying to win their first Big 12 game, which is nuts. And then should be a good one in Waco, TCU and Baylor. Baylor's only a 3-point favorite there. But a lot of big national games. The only top 10 game featuring 2 teams in that area is in Happy Valley, where Ohio State is going to take on Penn State. Ohio State's a 3-point favorite. And a lot of good games around the landscape of college football. Oregon's at the Big House in Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. A rivalry game of sorts. Probably doesn't have the flair that it used to, but Florida, Georgia, down there in Jacksonville. That's where that game's going to be played. So we'll get to the college football storylines, a big one out of the ACC. Clemson is really, I don't know how they're under the radar, but that's a good football team. They're playing really well as of late. Louisville is their opponent. And then a sneaky big game for BYU. You have to hope that SMU is for real. They welcome in a good Pitt team. Pitt is one of the remaining undefeated teams in college football. Your pro football weekends started last night, week 9. Did the New York Jets save their season? Well, they at least stayed alive. Aaron Rodgers finally looked decent in the second half. Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 1. Sorry, Devontae. And the Texans are beat up. They're injured, and the Jets were able to take advantage. First half, you could hear chants of sell the team from the Jets faithful. And then they turn it around. And the Jets' schedule actually is not bad moving forward. Of course, as a Jet fan, I will tell you nothing exciting happens with them ever. But for one day at least, they were able to stay alive. 2-7 is hard to come back from. So a little Thursday night football last night. 14 games remaining over the course of Sunday that will culminate in a Monday night game at Arrowhead, where the Chiefs welcome in Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Utah Jazz lost again, and I'm here for it, as you guys know. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh. I know Jazz fans are bummed out. I have not been this confident in the future of the Utah Jazz in a number of years as I am today. Stack the L's. Let's get Cooper Flagg. Now, Jazz fans did get a front-row look at what the prize could have been if they decided to do this 2 years ago, but they didn't, and Victor Wembanyama is a Spur. And the San Antonio Spurs rolled into Salt Lake, and they handled the Jazz very, very easily. Some better stuff from some of the young players. Kyle Filipowski is really making the most of his opportunities as Larry Markkinen is dealing with a, quote, sore back. Larry might be dealing with a lot of sore things over the course of the season, so get used to that. And obviously the news that just sucks that Taylor Hendricks is out for the year. Utah Hockey Club will be back at it coming up tomorrow in Vegas. It is a 4-game road trip for the Hockey Club. We're going to do a little hockey on the show today. RSL will fight to keep their season alive tomorrow, 7 o'clock in Minnesota. It'll be on Apple TV. So we'll get you ready for the RSL game as well. So a lot to do on this Friday afternoon, this post-Halloween Friday afternoon. Hopefully you had a fun, safe Halloween Thursday night, and you're having a good Friday. A happy Friday to you. Congratulations, you made it. It is time for the weekend. Guest list today goes like this. A lot of good ones. Max Brown right out of the gates to do some college football. I'm not emotional, I promise. But, Max Brown will join us right out of the gates to do a little college football. Going to bring in Howard Beck, one of my favorites, NBA Daily Assist style. We'll do some jazz and some RSL with Andy Larson. Neil Smith behind the glass to talk some hockey, the former general manager of the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders, chief scout for the Detroit Red Wings as well. Nobody better to talk hockey with than Neil. And then Zach Harper rolls by as well. So we have Max Brown, Howard Beck, Andy Larson, Neil Smith, Zach Harper, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners on this Friday. And that guy wearing a Patrick Ewing New York Knicks t-shirt today. When did you're not old enough to be a Patrick Ewing fan. When did you get that shirt?
I guess I'm technically not old enough to be a Patrick Ewing fan. I saw very, very little of the tail end of his career, but when you're a Knicks fan, Spence, you kind of have to live in the past in some ways.
Fair enough.
You're understanding of this, so
Oh, yeah.
that's the vibe here today. But doing it casual-ish Friday. Not that Thursday through Monday is much different here, but I'm glad Hoops is here. So my Knicks apparel is back in the rotation.
Hoops is here, and the college basketball season is essentially upon us. The official opening will be next week, which just adds another piece to this puzzle as far as what we'll cover every single day. All right, our first guest on a Friday, right out of the gates, is going to be Max Brown to do college football. But before we get to Max, courtesy of our friends and your friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, it's your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Stop by their location at 3500 Southwest Temple or visit them online at standardrestaurant.com. On a Friday, it's time now for your opening tip. It's an interesting time for sport across the landscape of our market right now. The Jazz are not good, and I do believe this is by design. They're not going to say it. No team has ever said it, but as I say oftentimes, as somebody who has been on this side of the microphone for a long time now, but prior to that was on the other side of the door where decisions are made. Do not listen to what teams tell you. Watch what they do. It's like a life principle. Don't listen to what somebody tells you. Judge them off their actions. People will tell you who they are. It's your job to listen. And so while the Jazz will not come out and tell you that their plan this year is to lose intentionally, it's messaging like development. It's messaging like we need to see what we have with young players. And I'm using air quotes for the 4 people watching on YouTube right now. You can see me using air quotes. Appreciate you guys. So when Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck talk about development, really what they're saying behind the scenes is we tried to bring in some vets. We couldn't do it. So ultimately, this year is going to be about the Jazz putting themselves in the best possible situation to try to capitalize on what is a loaded draft class, according to experts. So I see a lot of the memes going around. I hear a lot of people talking about the disappointment that you find yourselves in with Utah Jazz. I promise you this is painful, but it is the right thing long term. It's a tough ask of a community. It's a tough ask of a fan base. It's a tough ask of people to invest their hard-earned money in your product when that product is not going to bring a lot of instant gratification. Ryan Smith talks about the long game all the time, which made me even more confused as to why they weren't playing the long game 2 years ago when they unloaded Mitchell and Gobert and Quinn and Dennis took off. So, again, the best time to have done this was 2 years ago. The second best time is right now, right? So it's going to be a long year for the Jazz. It has already been and may continue to be a long year for Utah football, right? Losing 4 straight games for the first time since 2017. An underdog at home, essentially, to your rival coming up next week as BYU rolls into town. That line has been a little bit funky. We'll update you on it before we say goodnight tonight. So, a tough year for the Jazz, a tough year for the Utes. the Utah Hockey Club, to me, this feels a little bit like the Royals, right? So the Royals were kind of granted immunity from a lot of, harsh criticism of their performance because it was just great to have them back after they took off. And this is the first year for the Utah Hockey Club. I would imagine they will be given some grace. It's not an expansion team, but it remains a young team, essentially trying to find their footing. They did get a nice win the other night against the Flames. They're going to be on the road against the Golden Knights. They have a couple of road games, I think 4 in total. And, they're going to kind of oscillate back and forth. They've got 5 wins. They've got 4 losses. They have a couple of overtime points. They have 12 points in the Central Division, but they're not a contending team either. The 2 outliers are BYU football, who at this point at 8-0 still have everything exciting and special on the table, and potentially Real Salt Lake, who finds themselves in the middle of a playoff really battle with Minnesota. Minnesota and RSL, very similar teams. The metrics indicate there's not a big separation. They've just been unable to solve each other with essentially 3 draws, and Minnesota advancing on PKs, but RSL will try to stay alive tomorrow. But it's interesting. I was texting with some friends about this the other night because they asked me how the lackadaisical performance of Utah football and the underwhelming product that is the Utah Jazz affect listenership and affect audience, size, and affects the way people kind of interact. And it's funny because it's certainly cyclical, as we talk about all the time. And the fact of the matter is, I talk to people at the newspapers and we talk to people, in content creation business. And certainly there are people that listen, right? There are people that are mad and they just want to hear about it more. Maybe it's a little masochist tendency. And maybe that's where Jazz fans fall right now. Maybe that's where Ute fans fall right now. When BYU's good, because BYU fans consume content. They listen to sports talk radio. They read the articles. And there are a few metrics in place where even BYU basketball is outpacing Jazz basketball as far as consumer interest right now. But if kind of paying attention to some of the social conversations, getting feedback from listeners via DMs and emails, one of the things that I really love about our community, and by our community, I mean every product, Utah, BYU, Jazz, Hockey Club, RSL, and I could keep going, is the way people refer to their favorite teams as we, right? So there's kind of a healthy balance to be found, because if you attach your identity to a game being played by 18 to 24-year-olds using an oblong leather ball, probably not the best look, and you're probably setting yourself up for failure. But I was just thinking about this, analyzing, because what I try to do in my show, I'm not a only Ute, only BYU, only Jazz, only RSL. I try to use the 4 hours to spread our coverage across with everything we possibly can cover. And then it's essentially why I always talk about our podcast page, because if you are a fan of only one or only two, you go to our podcast page, you can find content for what you want. And that's why I try to spread our coverage across all of the products, because I want to make sure, 2.5 million people across the landscape that have the ability to tune in if they want to. I want to capture as many of them as possible, as opposed to just leaning into one product. But the statement, it was resonating with me because Amy Donaldson, our friend, has released her RSL podcast. And if you are an RSL fan, it's called Making of a Moment. It's available wherever you get your shows. And it's 3 episodes out. I'm not sure how many Amy's going to release. There are a couple of bonus episodes. And it just reminded me of what it was like to be a part of bringing that team here in 2004, and how important it was for us to put a point of emphasis on everything we did to make you, the consumer and the fan, feel like you were a part of what we were doing. And it's certainly not just an RSL thing. And it's why you hear teams come up with their mantras or come up with their advertising slogans early on in the season that sound like, we are the Utah Jazz, or this is our year, or this is your team, right? And ultimately, I was thinking about it through that prism, because after listening to Amy kind of interview so many people that were part of that sojourn once upon a time, that 20 years later, I don't know that RSL will ever move the needle the way college football does, or the way the Utah Jazz do, or eventually the hockey club. And the hockey club is tasked right now with what we were tasked with in 2004, and that is make the Utah Hockey Club a part of the fabric of this community. It's one of the reasons why, and this is very unpopular, it's not a hot take. It's just my own personal taste and opinion. I very much want the name to remain Utah Hockey Club. I can't even tell you, the Sunday after opening day, turning on my television and watching a hockey team with Utah across its chest play in Madison Square Garden against my childhood hockey team, the New York Rangers, I was blown away. I'm like, this is really cool. I don't think I'd ever saw this being a possibility or a reality. And, what they're going to have to do is try to do the best they can to capture the imagination of this community to believe that the Utah Hockey Club is ours. Because right now, if you go down to games, you see plenty of Utah Hockey Club sweaters and sweatshirts and hats, but it does feel like there's a tremendous amount of Avs fans or Bruins fans. Like the games I've been to, you look around, it's like 50-50. It's not even a home game. It's loud. It's because hockey fans are awesome. They always have been. But it doesn't necessarily feel like, at least yet, and of course we're a couple of weeks into this thing, a couple months into this thing, it's adopted as ours yet. And it took us, with the soccer club, a long, long time. And, watching from my seat what it was like to see the Jazz when they came here in the 80s and their games were on tape delay on KSL after BYU football, watching all the hard work of people to try to make that franchise, which was a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, honestly, because we don't have jazz music here, okay? And down in New Orleans, they literally have a team called the Saints. It's an NFL team, but they adapted the Mardi Gras colors. Pro basketball was new. Nobody was coming to games. The old Frank Layden saying, hey, Frank, what time does the game start? He would say, what time can you get there, right? And honestly, it took probably 6, 7, 8 years for this community to embrace the Jazz as their own. And ultimately what it did, it took something very simple, and that is Frank and Scott and that great front office drafting intelligently, building deliberately, and then taking the Lakers to 7 games in '88 with John and Carl and Mark Eaton and Bobby Hansen guarding Magic Johnson. And suddenly the Jazz were on the cover of Sports Illustrated as this upstart team that had a chance to upend Magic and Kareem and Michael Cooper and James Worthy, those great Laker teams. And suddenly that run kind of ingrained the Jazz into this community. And now you hear Jazz fans all the time say things like, well, we're not very good. Or who can we get in the draft, right? It's this community connection that's been built over a number of years with a lot of success, never a championship. And same thing with Utah football, same thing with BYU football. You hear fans all the time talk about, man, we've lost 4 in a row, or we're still alive for the college football playoff. And yes, that exists other places, but there's something about our community that once this team permeates into our fabric, they become a reflection of us. And that's why it feels so personal. And that's why sometimes it feels so exciting. So if you're a Utah football fan, it feels personal, it feels disappointing. If you're a BYU football fan, it feels exciting, it feels fun. But no matter what the product is, I just kind of love how all these fan bases have adopted it as their own, and it is a reflection of who we are, even though sometimes the results are not what you want them to be. All right, we'll do some college football coming up on the other side. My buddy Max Brown will stop by. I want to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products. Nate Orchard, Jake Weber, these are like the best people. I say this all the time. If you're going to pick a business, you should pick the people that run the business. Pick these people. So it's cold now, and if you have failed to capitalize on the potential of replacing your windows, your house is cold and your heating bill, electric bill is going to go through the roof. So Advanced Window Products right now has a very special deal. It's their football special this week, and you get $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. So the good news is they can service you before it gets super cold if you call today at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. But also, if you anticipate maybe buying or selling a home in the springtime, if you call today, you can get on the schedule. You can capitalize on the savings. So 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100 or online at advancedwindows.com. Max Brown leads us off. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700.
Finally learned the hard way that all good things take time.
Favorites on a Friday. My buddy Max Brown to get us ready for the weekend ahead. Max, happy Friday, buddy. How we doing?
Happy Friday, Spence. Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So let's get this out of the way. Did we dress up for Halloween? Did we go trick-or-treating? What was the Max Brown Halloween experience like?
Dude, this is the first time I hadn't dressed up in a little while, but it was funny last night because I saw Macaulay Culkin dress up as Joe Burrow, which when people stop me on the street, those are the two dudes that people say I look like. I was Joe Burrow 2 years ago. I was Travis Kelce, and my wife was Taylor Swift last year before it got super trendy. So I'm usually in the spirit, but this year I find myself on the road.
You can't drop that on me to start the interview because now I've got your Twitter pulled up. You do look like a hybrid of Macaulay Culkin and Joe Burrow. I've never realized that.
Yeah, I get social media says if Peyton Manning and Joe Burrow had a child with Peyton Manning's 5 head and Joe Burrow's, I guess it's the hairstyle. I don't even know. I have skin complexion or whatever. But, yeah, someone stops me and says I look like Joe Burrow literally once every other week.
I can see that. I've never put that together. I usually pride myself on those type of comps. But we'll move on. Nobody gives a rip. All right, Max, our local teams are on a bye, so let's just start with a couple of thoughts here, and then let's get ready for some games this weekend. And let's start with the disappointing, the Utah Utes. And look, as I've said all week, I get a lot of things wrong. I'm fine saying that as a radio host. I don't know that I've ever been as wrong as I've been about anything as far as how wrong I've been with this Utah football team. 4 straight L's, and now we're back to a quarterback situation where Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose are going to split the reps. And BYU's in town coming up next Saturday. Just wanted to get some thoughts from you on the Utes today.
Yeah, whenever something like this happens, which obviously, I mean, for Utah, this is a first time under Kyle Whittingham. But when, teams don't live up to expectations, that you have coordinators and guys on the team that have had a lot of success, I always go kind of more like big picture, like more culture and emotion and like, all right, what changed here? And just zooming out again, I'm not following the beat like I know a lot of local Utah fans are as much, but from a national level, like what changed? All right, this is the first year where Utah, at least all off season, was the top dog, and the expectations were extremely high. And Utah's had high expectations, but even then, when they were in the Pac-12, it still felt like you had every reason to talk about Oregon, Washington, USC, or, I know ASU had a year there in there a little bit, and there was schools that pop up in there. But you felt like Utah could have that edge. Yes, we knew we had talent. Yes, they knew they had good players. Yes, we knew they had a great head coach. But it was almost like, hey, we're the underdog. And it's got me thinking that just from zooming out, that like this was the year where no one was counting them out, and they were borderline, I would say, most people's Big 12 pick across the board. And I wonder if, you start buying into that a little bit, losing your edge a little bit. And I do think the roller coaster that's been Cam Rising is not insignificant, but obviously it's bigger than just that. And, the Whittingham coach news, coach in waiting, I think is interesting and unique for a locker room. At the time, I didn't think anything of it because I'm like, oh, Coach Whittingham, he'll handle it. But then looking back, you have to wonder if that just, I don't know, lessens that edge is the best way that I can put it for a Utah team that's prided themselves and had a lot of success with that edge over the past decade.
Tell me from a quarterback standpoint, we had Scott Mitchell speak to this a couple of weeks ago, and Scott talked about from his vantage point, if he was the starter, he wanted all the reps with the ones. He did not want to split them. And we know that Cameron and Isaac at one point were splitting the reps with the ones, and now Cameron shut down for the year. But now we hear that Brandon and Isaac are splitting reps with the ones. From your vantage point, what does that say about where we're at with the quarterback spot?
It says that you're searching for answers, which is an obvious statement for sure at this point in the season. I think for me, splitting the reps is one thing if you have, if it's the NFL and you have 2 quarterbacks that have played a lot of football, and so they don't need those practice reps from just a sheer, like, I need that experience. Obviously, any player across any sports could use practice reps to get acclimated to the game plan. But when you're, a true freshman quarterback, every rep, at least you should be learning something. It's a new look. It's even if it's not a new look, it's something that you're getting more accustomed to. So that's where it gets more concerning for me of like, hey, you're taking away a growth opportunity. But on the same side, he's been given a lot of starts and a lot of experience so far this season that at a certain point, to the coach's responsibility. You have a duty to try to find answers at a position, and if the quarterback isn't at a winning level, I understand the decision, but it's delicate. And I think I've never been in a split rep situation, but I have been in a situation where you're planning on playing two guys in a game, and if that's the case, then I think out goes the window of having complex game plans. I'd imagine it's going to be very base install, knowing that whoever's behind center can operate, at least in the passing game. Running game, maybe a little bit different, but at least in the passing game, it's concepts that those guys have repped all off season.
I think the most impressive, just for me, the most impressive element of the start for Brigham Young is just how productive they've been across the board. So, real quick, 17 players have scored a touchdown. 11 players have a pick. 8 players have a sack. So, this isn't just a one-trick pony. They're complementary. They've been great in all three phases. But just same question. We're sitting here, BYU 8-0, climbing up the polls. What do you make of the start for Brigham Young?
It's awesome to see, and it works in contrast to the rest of the country. It feels like, you have in that top 10, top 15, it's all about the star teams, I think, or the star players, I should say, right? Like a team like Miami is getting the benefit of the doubt. A team like Ohio State, after a poor performance last week, they're getting the benefit of the doubt. But then you have teams like BYU, and I'd put my alma mater in there, the Pitt Panthers, where it truly is a team effort. It truly is. We're relying on all 22 starters and special teams to get it done, and it's a new player every single week. And what impressed me about BYU is they're able to beat you in different ways, and I think it'll be interesting of just as this plays out, if BYU continues to take care of business. Obviously if they go undefeated, they're in. But what gets interesting is, if they were to lose in a conference championship type game, and again, I'd say the same thing about Pitt over there in the ACC, and they're a one-loss team. If you're a BYU fan, you should be saying we shouldn't get punished for a conference championship loss. We're a one-loss team. That shouldn't work against us. But when you look at, that those teams on the border, whether it's a 2, potentially 3-loss Texas A&M or an Alabama, whether it's a 1-loss Miami, if they were to lose in their conference championship game, or 2-loss Clemson or something like that, it becomes you're splitting hairs there. And I'm fascinated, and I say it in the context of this question, but because BYU doesn't have the style points, they don't have these huge high-profile players. They are getting more national recognition week by week, but when you come from a voting standpoint, I'm interested to see if a BYU winning style, again, I put Pitt in the same boat, if that is sexy enough to get them over the hump if we get in a decision point where, it's them versus another team trying to get in the playoff.
So before we move off our local teams, one more question here, because, rivalry games are tricky. They get weird. Regardless, there have been very few, and I grew up going to BYU Utah. Then I went to school at Utah. Now 18 years in the media, I've covered a ton of these games. And there may have been 1 or 2 years over the course of this game where I felt confident that one team was going to just tear apart the other. More often than not, something zany happens, something weird happens. BYU, according to DraftKings, is a 4.5-point favorite. That actually feels like a lot based off the chaos that can ensue, but Utah football does not deserve the benefit of the doubt right now. Utah still has a very good defense. The metrics say most of their numbers are top 3 or 4 outside of sacks and forced fumbles and turnovers, but just meat and potatoes. They're a good rush defense or good pass defense. And, Jake Retzlaff still 2 or 3 times a game makes decisions where you go, dude, pump the brakes, man. So I don't know what's going to happen, but from your vantage point as somebody who's played in rivalry games, what makes next Saturday potentially such a wild card?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say probably to what you just alluded to. I don't think you have either quarterback. Obviously, Utah's searching for answers, and BYU, Retzlaff, he's done good things. But to your point, there's those few plays a game where you're like, I'm not really sure. And he's also kind of really put a brand on. He's got these gutsy, timely throws that you're kind of sitting there like, man, if he doesn't if the game shakes out where he's not getting those throws, or a DB just gets one more hand up, or it's instead of 3rd and 8 and it's manageable, it's 3rd and 10 and 11, and that throw becomes a bit more difficult. Like, it's only a matter of time before things catch up to him kind of energy. And that hasn't happened this season, which he deserves a ton of credit for because he's finding ways to win, and that's obviously the most important thing for the QB position. But I think that element of, hey, if you have a quarter or two where one of these quarterbacks either wakes up on the Utah side, because we have seen flashes of that at least earlier on in the season, or if BYU rests off, if it is an off night and the ball bounces Utah's way in the passing game, that to me is the dynamic that could shake this thing. And I feel like the old adage of rivalry games, you never know what's going to happen, applies to any rivalry in college football, but this year especially, where you have a BYU team where at least nationally, I think there's a corner of the media world that's like, all right, BYU, it's only a matter of time before they stub their toe. And then on the flip side, Utah is an underperforming team. And so those two contrast each other, which should make up for hopefully a good rivalry game.
So I was surprised to read this morning that Iowa State is 99th in the country in rush defense, just behind Bowling Green and just ahead of UMass. I really, I'll be honest, I had no clue that was the deal. They're getting 13.5 at home against Texas Tech, who is one of the most potent offenses in the Big 12. If you're a BYU fan, you're watching this game closely. Is Iowa State on upset watch coming up against Texas Tech, you think?
I'm of the stance that, I mean, we talked about it 2 weeks ago when I was on with you. Like, the Big 12 is fun to watch. I think to answer your question, yes, they're on upset alert because that chunk of 7-8 teams, I mean, they all can show up and play. And even, I mean, at this point, Utah, I know it hasn't been pretty, but like, no, Utah's not going to be an easy out. TCU, I had them in person earlier on in the season. They have 2 NFL receivers and a capable offense. I know Utah shut them down, but like, I think that's the story of the Big 12 this year. And that line, I'm with you. That's a lot of points. But all these teams down the stretch, I think that's what's so impressive about BYU too, is with how volatile the Big 12's done, or how volatile it's been. BYU's been the most consistent team, and that's another thing with Texas Tech too. That loss versus Washington State, where they absolutely got blown out of the water, it'll be interesting as we fast forward, too, with a potentially one-loss Boise State. If Washington State finishes the year with one loss, like all those questions will be interesting for a Texas Tech team as we're trying to connect the dots there.
So the eyes of the college football world, Happy Valley. I have been there one time. We went and saw a BYU Penn State game back in like 92. Yes, I'm old. Don't send DMs. Ohio State's getting 3 here. Both James Franklin and Ryan Day not great against top 5 opponents, but one of them will win. What do you think plays out as Penn State is taking on Ohio State there in Happy Valley?
The first thing that jumps out is this is not a night game, which I think is huge for Ohio State. Obviously, they'll still show up, but I played in Happy Valley during the day, and I was thankful as the opposing quarterback that was the case because it's at least, in my opinion, manageable. Again, it's going to be loud. Don't get me wrong, but to not have that whiteout and under the lights is a big deal. This will be interesting because there's an anxiety around the Ohio State program that I think is unique only to the Buckeyes. There's a lot of programs that have tons of expectations and tons of fan base that have the standard is extremely high, borderline unrealistic. But, man, just watching Will Howard's press conferences, just the sense around Ryan Day, it very much feels like this is the season where they either have to get over the hump and take care of business in these types of games, or who knows, maybe Ohio State's going a different direction. On the flip side, for Penn State, this is why you made the change at offensive coordinator to go get Andy Kotelnicki to win these games. Ohio State and Michigan, that's been the crux for James Franklin. So anxiety on one hand for the Buckeyes. I think internally the Penn State James Franklin probably feels that anxiety. I think outwardly he doesn't show it as much, but this is a critical game for both teams. I still have both these teams getting in the college football playoff when it's said and done, but it could be the difference of one team being on the fringe and maybe getting booted out of the playoff when it's all said and done, and the other team potentially getting a first-round bye and hosting a playoff. So a huge one regardless.
So I've heard more than a few people say that there's a world that exists for Michigan to make it into the CFP, even though they have 3 losses, but they have to run the table. And I suppose the reason is they have Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, then they're at Indiana, and they close against Ohio State. I would be stunned if they get all those wins based off of what we've seen. But Oregon is at the Big House coming up tomorrow. What do you make of that matchup? How do you think it plays out?
I mean, it'll be interesting with Michigan's quarterback Jack Tuttle announced that he'll be retiring, so they'll have to go back to the well with the two guys that started this season. So again, similar to Utah in that regard of having to find quarterback answers. Oregon's been rolling ever since that. I mean, they got out physical versus Boise State, made the shakeup at offensive line, and I like the Ducks. I thought the Purdue game, like many folks, was a trap game, and they responded after that one. So I expect Oregon to take care of business. And to your point about that 3-loss Big Ten hypothetical Michigan getting into the playoff, it's interesting because before this season, when I was looking forward of like, hey, how could this thing shake out? I said, hey, it might not be this year, but eventually we're going to get a 3-loss team into the college football playoff, just because as the game, I think, moves to a greater parity from teams, call it 10 through 40. I think that's a recipe for a potential 3-loss team to get in. But if you do the math, like right now, Alabama is the 5th SEC team in terms of the overall ranking. So if you're thinking that the SEC gets in 4 and maybe a 5th, and then all the other conferences get 1, like you run out of spots. So at this stage in the season, I am not of the camp that there's a path for Michigan to get in there. I think that 3-loss slot would be more so for the SEC team to get a 5th team in. But we'll see. Crazier things have happened.
Before we get to your alma mater playing a SMU team that BYU handled pretty well on the road, let me start with a general ACC question. Miami's undefeated, but is there a world that exists where Clemson is actually the better team? Because after losing to Georgia, they've stayed clean.
I think so. Yeah, I don't even think that's a hot take per se. I think Clemson's defensive line seems to be more productive, or just defense in general. Miami's very much got the mentality of we're just going to outscore people and good luck keeping up with us, which is great when you're playing teams that are not top 10 in the country. And I think unless Miami figures out that defensive equation, they could, and Cam Ward runs out of magic, they could get stopped. But yeah, Clemson could be right there at the top. And then again, I like what Pitt's doing. It's not the old Pitt, and SMU at least is still in the equation. I think I worry about SMU's depth as we get into November, but all 4 of those teams still in the equation.
All right, let's move over before I say you lose to your alma mater. And if you're a BYU fan, you have to hope that SMU continues to play well, because that makes your win against them look better. This isn't rocket science. It is in Dallas. SMU's a 7-point favorite, but your boys have stayed clean. How do you think this one plays out?
I like that line for the Pitt Panthers, and that's not even just a hometown route. I think in years past when Narduzzi's had a good team, I mean, his best team was with Kenny Pickett when Kenny was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and they had Jordan Addison out wide, and that seemed like to be just, you kind of struck 2-star players at the right time with Narduzzi's identity. This season, though, they have the same defense that is flying around. That is a very good college football defense. They might not necessarily have the NFL names, but they are rotating a bunch of dudes. They have depth, and they're playing extremely confident. And then on the offensive side, this is ironic coming from me being a quarterback, but the question with Pitt's always been, outside of Kenny Pickett, like, can they find a quarterback? There was Nate Peterman and then gaps between the next decade after that instead of Kenny Pickett. And Eli Holstein, he's good. No one talks about him nationally, but he is a very good college quarterback, both with his legs, and he can beat you from the pocket, which I said this about BYU, but Pitt has the ability to beat you in different ways. It can be a defensive game. Last week they had 3 pick sixes. It can be beat you from the pocket, Eli Holstein. It can be a Eli Holstein legs game. And then they got great running backs too, and skill players out wide. So I like the Pitt Panthers. I like that line too against, especially coming off an SMU team that they struggled last week. Got the win, but they struggled last week.
Last thing, which conference is most likely to get 2 teams in, Big 12 or ACC?
I think it's got to be the ACC because of what we said, Miami and Clemson there. But it'll get interesting. I haven't looked at the schedules, but of those 4 ACC teams, they don't all play each other. So coming down the stretch, there could be a scenario where, like a scenario, and again, I haven't seen the schedules, but where a 1 loss, like the third of those teams has 1 loss and is very much in their minds in contention for a CFP spot and is awkwardly left out, which, again, speaks to just these huge conferences nowadays where everyone's not playing each other.
All right, Max, where can people go find your work, bud?
Yeah, all over social media, Max Brown. And then tomorrow I'm on the call for Syracuse, Virginia Tech, noon on the CW.
Very nice. Thanks, brother. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games, okay?
Thanks, Spence, too.
All right, Max Brown, lead college football analyst for the CW. Does a great job on all of the social channels, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. Check him out. Just his name, at Max Brown, which is spelled with an E. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Big O Tires. Right now, it's the fall into savings sale. You can save between $80 and $120 off a select set of tires. All brands, whatever you need. Big O Tires is your true one-stop shop for automotive repair. You can stop in for tires, wheels, alignments, rotations, oil changes, brakes, batteries, shocks, struts, fluids, and more. Big O Tires offers free flat repairs, air, alignment, and brake checks as well. No credit needed financing options to fit any budget and any situation. Walk-ins are welcome, or schedule an appointment online or over the phone. You can visit bigotires.com to find a location near you. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. The great Howard Beck stops by next right here on ESPN 700. I love these guys. Oh, man. I got to say, once I took the 4 down to Brooklyn at a French 75 and a matcha latte, just checked him out. Outdoor venue, small, like 2,000 people. It's one of my favorite bands. This has to be the Airborne Toxic event, right?
As you know.
I introduced you to them. I liked him
2 minutes ago, you did.
liked him before it was cool, man.
You did.
I did.
And yeah, you showed me them
Yeah.
at the commercial break.
Who's our next guest?
Mr. Howard Beck.
Oh, what a coincidence. On a Friday. Howard, how are you, sir?
That was a great bit. That was fantastic. I'm doing great.
Did I check all the boxes?
I'm not a matcha guy.
Okay.
My daughter, who is born and raised in Brooklyn, very much a matcha person and a matcha latte person, but not me. I'm like clearly not quite Brooklyn hip enough, but I do appreciate being brought in to the phenomenal tunes of Everyone Talks the event. Who I believe I mentioned to you just a week ago at this time.
You did, and you caught me off guard. So I did my research because you know me, I do my own research. Me and Stock, that's how we roll. And jammed out to some. They're very good. So I appreciate you bringing them into my life.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed them. There's quite a broad catalog of theirs to explore. So
very nice. So Howard, the best time to do what the Jazz are doing was 2 years ago. The second best time to do what they're doing is now. I'm ordering my Cooper Flag Jazz uniform. I am all in. Now, we have a fan base that's bummed out, but I have not been this optimistic about the Jazz for a number of years. 0-6, baby. Stack those L's.
I mean, they're doing a fantastic job of tanking without even they haven't even pulled the plug on marketing yet or any of the other bet. They haven't traded Jordan Clarkson for 5 second-round picks yet or any of that. And so plenty of still, tankalicious maneuvering to look forward to.
This has to be the deal, though, right? I mean, I've talked about this earlier. Somebody who has been on this side of a microphone for 18 years but spent years on the other side of the doors where some decisions are made. Teams will tell you what the message is, but you have to watch what they do to understand the actual deal. So when they say things like development and youth movement, it's like NBA lingo for we're probably going to lose a lot this year. This has to be the deal, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this, that the youth for the last couple of years, and I think even the messaging coming to this season, the Jazz were not in the category of, say, Brooklyn or Washington, who have made their intentions very clearly known by what they're doing. Neither of those teams have, say, a Lowry Markkanen. The Jazz have been trying to kind of be cute with this or play it down the middle or maybe do what we call the middle build where you're still good and you're not terrible and you don't tear down, you don't play the lottery game. But, I mean, you are by default, if not by design at this point, and maybe by both. And it's fine. I hate to say it, but it's fine. And it's probably not, real enjoyable for Jazz fans, but I think Jazz fans, like Nets fans, like Wizards fans, are probably sitting back at a certain point going, you know what, there's no point in winning 30 or 25. We might as well be bad. And it's not just Cooper Flag, right? Like the two guys from Rutgers, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are, firmly in the mix. And it's not all or nothing. This is not one of those drafts where it's like, well, we're gonna tank and we're gonna have a terrible record, and oh man, we didn't win the lottery, and now we're gonna regret it all. No, there's at least 3 really good players, and maybe more. And as you know, I'm not the draft expert here, but I talk to scouts and talk to people who followed the draft, and they're pretty excited about all 3 of those guys, and possibly more. So it's a good year to be bad, and there's more than one potential prize who could change the trajectory of your franchise. And, it's just the reality. It's where they are.
Yeah, for sure. And, for me, I actually think it's great news. I wasn't sure if they were ever going to do it because the DNA of a coach is he always wants to win. And, when you hear the ownership group or front office talk about their desires, it's big game hunting, it's add vets, and there was never a realistic avenue. This has to be the deal. But I did want to ask you one thing because I always hear people say well, in Salt Lake, you have to draft, develop, retain. And yes, you do have to do that. But isn't that what Golden State did? Isn't that what Boston, for the most part, has done? And I think, and we actually did see this a little bit. Now, Mike Conley of course, at 25 would have been a bit different here, at 33, 34. But once Donovan, Gobert, Quinn, really good coach, once that group started to evolve and rise a little bit, then Dennis Lindsay was able to expedite the process by trading for Bojan Bogdanovic and Mike Conley, and those were really good teams. So once you draft, develop, and retain, like Golden State did, yes, you added Durant, which makes it unfair, but draft, develop, retain is not just a Salt Lake ethos. Like, kind of doesn't matter where you are. That's more or less what you have to do everywhere, yes?
Yes and no. If you're a small market, it's pretty much your only path. And
Yes.
Oklahoma would be another great example of it, right? Both the current version and the earlier iteration when they drafted Durant and Westbrook and Harden and Ibaka. All that said, if you want to shortcut it and you're in a big market, you might be able to do it differently, right? Now, we've seen big market teams flail and whiff over and over and over by clearing cap room and thinking, oh, just because we're the big market, they'll all want to flock here, and it doesn't work. We saw the Knicks fail at this. We've seen the Lakers fail at this. The Nets, quote-unquote, succeeded at it when they got Durant and Kyrie Irving, and it still did not end so well. And the Clippers, similarly, where, Kawhi was the free agent and came with Paul George via trade. And, we could have a whole other discussion about how to qualify or assess that experiment, but, it was a success on some level and didn't go where they wanted it to go. The Sixers drafted Embiid, developed Embiid, drafted Maxey, developed Maxey, but because of the success of those guys, it enabled them to then land Paul George. And again, it's early. We'll see, wait for Embiid and George to get healthy. But if the Utah Jazz or the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Memphis Grizzlies try to do the same thing, I don't think Paul George is joining Embiid and Maxey in Memphis or joining Embiid and Maxey in Charlotte. That's just the reality of the NBA. It might happen. It occasionally happens. But the truth in what you were the premise you were putting out there about, is it just a Utah thing? It's small markets have to assume at the outset we're probably not landing superstar free agents. So we're going to have to get talent the other ways, drafting them and developing them, or trading for them and hoping they want to stay.
Yes. Well said. All right. Moving on now. So San Antonio was in town last night, and for me, as you and I have talked about, and I talk about pretty often, it became pretty clear. And the Jazz knew this because they had freaking Rudy Gobert here, and Wembanyama kind of burst on the scene when he was young and he was French, and there was this video of him beating Gobert one-on-one. And then I'll never forget the first time I saw the side-by-side of Wembanyama and Rudy, and I'm like, he's like 4 inches taller than Gobert, who is huge. And so the best time to do what the Jazz are doing now was 2 years ago. The second best time is now. So the Jazz fans had a front row look at what they could have at least been in the mix for, and there's no guarantees. And he rolls in, and he puts up the dumbest stat line, 25 points, 9 boards, 7 assists, 5 steals, 5 blocks. They were plus 43 in his 34 minutes. What do you think this process is going to look like with San Antonio as they now have the next great thing, and now it's on a very good front office and coaching staff to make sure he's properly surrounded by players that will allow him to grow and what we all think he can be?
I think what's interesting, Spence, about this moment for them is that they know exactly what they have. The whole league knows exactly what they have. And the potential for Wembanyama to anchor a contender for the next 10 to 15 years is right there in front of us, right? We can all see what he's capable of, what he's already done, and with all the growth potentially to go. The interesting part to me is how quickly do you go into this phase of okay, surround him with talent, right? Are you developing young talent? Are you trying to go out and attract free agents who might want to play with Wembanyama? Are you trading for guys? And how soon are you doing all that? What's the urgency? And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's so telling. It's the time that we live in that already within the last few months, somebody had written one of the, how long can the Spurs afford to wait to create a contender when Wembanyama? And it's like, man, I understand we're in a time where everything's accelerated and guys get impatient and asked out sooner and sooner. But, man, nobody's asking out while still on their first 3 years of their rookie deal. They have time. The urgency is not that high. but that is the world we live in now. And so, look, Devin Vassell is a really great player, or a really good player for them, and he's hurt right now. Keldon Johnson's, got some promise and has produced during their bad years. Like, do they have the right pieces? Are they looking for the right pieces immediately? Chris Paul is obviously just a stopgap and somebody who can help mentor Wembanyama and the other young guys, but he's very close to retirement. So they're not, through their actions so far, they're not showing an urgency to say we've got to hit the pedal right now and become a contender immediately. And I don't think they have to either. Like Wembanyama strikes me as a very smart, very savvy guy, and I think he understands he's got a long road ahead of him. And if there's any franchise you should trust on day one as a rookie, it's the Spurs. So I'll be curious though to see, when do they finally hit the gas pedal? When do they think it's time? I think it makes sense to not try to rush this right now, partially because they've got some young guys who, could develop into foundational pieces, but partially because, the West is stacked, and, trying to be all in right now when you're still kind of on the rise, you don't have to rush it. There's going to be other teams that are going to start to fall out. Like, again, we may have talked about this before, so excuse me to the listeners if I'm repeating myself, but the Warriors and the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, all built around older stars, and the Clippers are already they let Paul George go. Kawhi is hurt. The Clippers are on their way down, right? The Warriors, I think, have done a really nice job of reloading right now. We'll see how much longer they can prolong their time with Steph Curry. But it's a matter of single-digit years, and on the, under 5 that they have left with him. And LeBron is turning 40 soon. Like, there's, the West is going to start to open up. And so I think it makes sense to try to time your build around Wembanyama for when you see the opportunity to actually join the elite and have, the decks are not going to be clear. Like, the Thunder aren't going anywhere, and the Mavericks aren't going anywhere. Timberwolves may not be going anywhere, but you can kind of see the outline of where the West is going to be in 3 to 5 years.
I wanted to follow up with something you referenced as far as Wembanyama's mentality and his makeup. I have never met him, and I don't know anything about him other than the first time I saw him, I'm like, oh, it reminded me of the first time I saw LeBron when ESPN televised his high school game and Walton was on the call, and that was the first time I saw it with my own eyes. And it's like, yeah, I know he's 18, but he's different at 17 or whatever. So you can tell he's different. You can tell he's next. But have you ever been able to kind of ascertain how this was created in the lab, what the makeup is, the people around him, and why he seems to have this reputation for having the perfect mentality to complement his skill set?
Great question. Don't know. Have met him once and have not done any. I'm not one who's gotten the nice junket to France to go do the big deep dive on Wemby. So I don't have anything firsthand to tell you. But it's so clear, like, that it's. There have been plenty of guys who are really tall, right? There have been plenty of guys who have been really tall, really skilled, or just really skilled, or whatever. The guys who succeed in this league and the guys who become superstars, it's because they've got other special elements to them. And in Wembanyama's case, his parents clearly raised him very well. He's very steady. He's thoughtful. He seems incredibly humble for all that he has already been able to enjoy through his success. He clearly works hard. He's about the right things. And so, every team hopes to get a player at some point who has transcendent athleticism, transcendent skill, talent that is, off the charts, right? Like, fine, cool, great. There are guys like that every year in the draft, but you want to get the ones who actually care and work hard and are coachable and easy to work with and are good teammates. And he seems like a dream because he seems like all of those things. The chemistry behind putting all that together from his earlier coaching, his family, whatever else, all that fed into that, I don't know. But whoever helped him, along the way over the first, 20 years of his life, did a damn good job.
It's something else to see in person, man. I'll tell you what. It is, like I said, it's like nothing I've ever seen before, but we can move on. I wanted to get your – I'm not a huge, like, the ratings are down, so the league's in trouble guy, but the ratings are bad. And, we have the deal in Philly with Embiid and Paul George, and I will never, ever fully accept basketball players, when healthy, deciding they just don't feel like playing basketball. And I'm not being dismissive of injuries because those things are real, but look, it's also fall. NFL, college football, the World Series numbers were through the roof. But any Howard Beck thoughts on why people at this point don't seem to be consuming NBA basketball the way they used to?
No, don't, because we're a week in, and reading anything into ratings right now, reading anything into early season trends right now, statistically, fouls, free throws, whatever, it's such a small sample size. None of it means anything yet. And, we had the overlap of a World Series involving two major markets. Is that part of it? I don't know. And that's the thing, too. Like, there are other people who are way smarter about ratings and how to parse them than me. And they're so contextual and subject to – I'll just put it this way. People who cite ratings, good or bad, usually have a reason. That's usually an agenda. So and I just don't want to feed into that. If the ratings are dramatically down a month, 2 months from now, and it looks like it's going to be a season-long trend and something has changed, then there's a discussion to be had. But right now, there's plenty else for people to be talking about. I'm not blaming you, Spence. I'm just saying, my exasperation is more that I can't believe sometimes how little data we're going to go on to start trying to, divine meaning from a handful of numbers over the course of 1 week of games. It's a little much.
And it's also silly to anoint or dismiss the team after 4 or 5 games. However, Milwaukee. Milwaukee, Howard, and we're Dame fans out this way. He played his college ball about 30 miles north. So, I know 1-4, only 5 games so far. And I'm a Doc guy, but I might be alone on the island at this point. And, yes, we'll see how it plays out. But you've got to be a little bit concerned at the way they've looked so far.
No, I think you got to be a lot concerned. Listen, there's a difference. We always do overreaction theater at this stage of the season, right? And it's fine. Sometimes it's just for discussion purposes. But there's a difference between overreacting to a team's if you're freaking out about the Sixers, I think you're overreacting. Two of their 3 best players haven't played yet. They're going to get healthy. They're going to play. And then it's just a matter of can they stay healthy. But you can't freak out about the Sixers. That's ridiculous. Being worried about the Bucks or the Nuggets, I think, is totally justifiable because you look at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals don't look great. The Nuggets have, demonstrably eroded since their championship a year and a half ago. And the Bucks have demonstrably eroded since their championship, 3.5 years ago. The Giannis Dame fit is not as great as certainly they hoped or as a lot of us expected. Their defense is not what it used to be. Middleton's hurt, and when he comes back, maybe that makes a little bit of a difference. But, Chris Middleton alone isn't going to fix the Bucks. No, I think there's reason to be concerned. And on top of that, my buddy Bill Ryder at CBS Sports reports yesterday, and I've checked with a few people, and they pretty much confirm that, there's a lot of buzz around the league that the clock's ticking on Giannis. That, he's certainly not agitating for a trade yet, but that day could come sooner than later. And that is worrisome for a team like Milwaukee. It's worrisome for any team with a player of his caliber. And so, you take all of that, and then you take, 3 coaches in a year, and, Doc has now had them from training camp on, so you can't just say, well, he came in mid-season and had to try to figure it out on the fly. No, Doc, Dame, and Giannis have now had, half a season plus training camp and this, first week together, and it still doesn't look good. That's legitimately concerning.
So since you referenced Denver, let's move over there for a moment. And, maybe we shouldn't be all that surprised based off the talent, they've lost over the past couple of years. They're clearly one of the teams that does not want to touch financial implications of spending too much cash, and we've seen it. with Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But they have, in my estimation, still, and honestly, when I watch him, it's kind of by far the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. Are we seeing the potential of what the Colts did with Andrew Luck? Are they going to – they already won a title, so he's got a ring. But, I mean, this is the guy that – with a market like that, and they're bigger than we are, but not by much, you pray to have a Nikola Jokic to build around because you're not in South Beach or L.A. or whatever. Are they in danger of wasting this generational talent?
Yes, they are. And you notice I'm not hesitating here, and you know me well enough to know I am not prone to hot takes, and I'm generally the one to push back on anything that seems like a hot take and then give you a bunch of really boring nuance. But they're in danger of wasting Jokic's prime, for sure. One of the things that you've heard me talk about, I think, is that in this era of the NBA, there's all these different ways you can now create a contender or a championship team, right? You don't have to have LeBron and Wade and Bosh. You don't have to have a super team. You can have, Giannis plus Middleton plus Drew Holiday, right? Those other two guys, really, really good. Perennial All-NBA? No. MVP caliber? No. But it was Giannis in a great ensemble, and it was Jokic in a great ensemble. But that ensemble had very thin margin for error, right? Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr., not all-stars, not going to be. Jamal Murray has not been all-star or all-NBA, has that kind of talent, but doesn't stay healthy long enough to get those honors. And he's kind of a borderline guy in those categories anyway. So this is not a team that has great talent and has a lot of room for error. They were a better than the sum of their parts team when they won the title. And then they lost their sixth man and their seventh man. And then this summer they lost their, third, fourth man, wherever you want to put Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So you've now lost three of your top seven players from when you won the title. You've done nothing to replace them. You drafted a bunch of young guys that you've got a lot of faith in and hoping that they can replace the guys that went out the door. But so far, none of that has happened. Christian Brown's been okay. But Julian Strawther, the rest of these guys, there's no indication yet that they're going to be able to fill the kind of roles that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown and Jeff Green played in winning the title. And aside from that, the league has gotten better since the Nuggets won that title, and the West has gotten better. And Jamal Murray doesn't quite look like himself. Had not a great playoffs and a really, a much worse Olympics. And so Jokic doesn't have another star to lean on. He's having to do more than ever. And they just had back-to-back nights where they had to go overtime to beat a couple of bad teams, including in my backyard here in Brooklyn. So, I don't know where the pivot is, if there is one, or if the Nuggets even have the ability to do it. But yeah, it's very plausible that Jokic does not make another finals, despite being the greatest player on earth right now.
Last one, Howard, then I'll set you loose. And Kenny Atkinson obviously is a well-respected coach, and he's been a head coach before. And it's interesting watching what Golden State and Cleveland are doing, and that's playing 13 guys a ton of minutes. But I was skeptical, and I watch the Cavs because we cheer for Donovan. Well, some of us do, but they beat the Raptors, they beat the Pistons, they beat the Wizards, but then they beat the Knicks and they housed the Lakers. And we're sitting here at 5-0. Are you starting to believe that this could be a team? Because everybody talks about Boston, maybe New York. Could Cleveland have something to say about the East when it's all said and done?
That's funny. I like Kenny Atkinson a lot. I've known him since he was an assistant on D'Antoni's staff with the Knicks, and Kenny was working with Jeremy Lin back then. I thought Kenny did an incredible job with the Nets during a period of time when they had no real A-level talent, and they overachieved every year. I'm glad to see him get another shot. And the thing I wondered going into this season was, could Kenny Atkinson, being a very offensive-minded coach and somebody who's, worked under D'Antoni, worked under Steve Kerr with the Warriors, would he be able to a little more dynamism and variety in their offense that could unlock some things? Because they've got so much overlap, right? I'm not convinced, as I think I'm not convinced Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland make sense together. I'm not convinced that Evan Mobley and together. And there are times when it seems like that team has been better when it's only one guard, one big, and then some bench guys, as opposed to all four of their stars. And look, so far so good. Kenny Atkinson's done some things to, I think, get the most out of that foursome. and this is despite missing Max Strus, who's their fifth starter usually. It's promising. It's only 5 games, so I'm not going to say like this is it. The Cavs are now in the mix to win the East or to be the team most likely to challenge Boston. But maybe, especially given that the Knicks are, having a little bit of a bumpy ride so far, and the Sixers aren't healthy so far, and we discussed the Bucks, and so the Cavs right now look like a really legit team to battle with Boston. But again, we're a weekend.
All right, Howard, I'll let you go so you can drive your gearless bike to the closest vintage clothing spot in Brooklyn and grab a T-shirt for the weekend. And always appreciate the time, my friend. Thank you.
I need to go pick up some artisanal honey on my way there. So, yeah.
There we go. Thanks, buddy. Have a good one.
Thanks, Vince.
The hippest NBA rider around. It is Howard Beck, at Howard Beck on Twitter. I say it all the time. He's one of my favorite writers and has been for like 20 years. So I appreciate his time. It's always fun to catch up with him. All right, we'll do a little RSL. We'll do a little Utah Jazz and bounce around with Andy Larson coming up. Neil Smith will stop by behind the glass to talk some Utah Hockey Club, one of our favorites, Zach Harper, later on. I want to remind you can get game day ready at Flanker Kitchen and Sporting Club at the Gateway, your ultimate destination for pro and college football watch parties. Follow at Flanker SLC on socials for exclusive game day specials and more. Reservations can be made at flankerslc.com. Andy hops on next right here on ESPN 700. Hey, ride with him. Behind the glass today, Neil Smith. He's going to join us, former general manager of the New York Rangers, the New York Islanders, lead scout for the Detroit Red Wings as well. We're going to bring in one of our favorites, Zach Harper. We're very busy until we say goodnight at 6 on a Friday. Time now, though, for our, well, hopefully weekly, now that the Jazz season has started. My buddy Andy Larson stops by on a Friday. Andy, happy Friday, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. So as a celebrator of holidays, Cinco de Mayo, little inside baseball there, I know that your Halloween was occupied by Jazz basketball, but there had to have been one or two Andy Larson Halloween excursions, yes?
Yeah, last weekend was a good time. My friends threw a Halloween party. It was a SpongeBob-themed party, which was interesting, but I'll tell you what, the best part of that party was that two separate couples came as the same couple's costume. One as Sandy Cheeks and one as Mermaid Man, if you're familiar with SpongeBob, I don't know. But what are the odds that two couples come as Sandy and Mermaid Man? I don't know. Unlikely, but it was a lot of fun.
I got to know what you dressed up as, obviously.
I unfortunately did not have a SpongeBob costume, and I went pretty lame this year. I reused last year's costume, Alan from the Barbie movie.
You know you're getting old when you start reusing costumes, right?
Yeah. We've talked about this on this program before. I am washed, and that's just all there is to it.
You're 30. You can't say you're washed. I have adult memories from the year you were born. You're not allowed to say you're washed, Andy.
Listen, I know when NBA player prime is, and I am beyond it.
That's true. Can't argue with that. All right, before we get to the Jazz, since we just did a NBA conversation with the incomparable Howard Beck, we will start with a little RSL. So, had Pablo on this week, and, it's pretty clear that RSL's having issues breaking down the way Minnesota plays. We have 3 games now, and I think 1 goal in the run of play. What's fair to say about RSL's failure to get the win on Tuesday night, and what are your thoughts on the potential of them coming back home after the match tomorrow?
Yeah, look, I mean, they're just not the attacking team that they were earlier in the year. They don't have the danger on the wings or in the middle to consistently score goals, to make teams scared, to make teams nervous. I think the tempo is clearly lower. The technique in the final third is, you're not seeing guys being dribbled around, or you're not seeing shots put on target as frequently. It's just a lower standard of play. And look, some of that is losing Andres Gomez, who I think was a top 3 winger in MLS this year before he was sold. And, again, I've defended that sell before, and I think it was a reasonable call for RSL. But, the big loss, frankly, is that Chicho has gone from MVP caliber player, best striker, best player in the league caliber to really bad, frankly. Like, he's not even an average MLS striker right now. He is complaining to the referees. He is jogging around the pitch. He is not contributing on the defensive end. He is not making productive runs on the offensive end. He's not setting up his teammates. And, most importantly, he's not scoring goals. He scored 1 goal in his last, 17 matches, I think it is. So, look, that's what it comes down to, is the players aren't performing like they used to. And clearly are less talented than they were earlier in the year. And so it's, as an RSL fan, a little bit of a bummer, to be sure. I think they still have a chance to get a result in Minnesota and come back to Salt Lake, but it's not something they should be favored in by any means. And it's been kind of a bummer end to the season.
One more thing here, and I am far from a tactician or a soccer expert. I'm simply somebody who's now watched it and covered it for 20 years, so I have a little bit of a pulse on it. But from an attacking standpoint, because, look, if they do not find a solution, and they might only need one solution, I think if they can get 1 goal, Minnesota will have to engage, and then RSL, in my opinion, probably a more skilled team that can outplay them if Minnesota's actually engaging with them. But, like, Diogo's your designated player. And, maybe I don't fully grasp the whole, like, Matt Crooks runs far thing, but do you anticipate any changes with the attacking formation where Crooks is centralized, Mark Zook, who's been awesome, is out right, Diego's out left, and Chicho up top? Like, if they're going to find a solution to break through that wall, do you think the attacking group, just as far as the personnel goes, needs to be different?
I think they're more dangerous with Julio up at the top, and and maybe at the expense of Chicho at this point, because again, I do think he's been that bad. Now I get it, like he's a DP, but both DPs, frankly, have not been among RSL's top 3 attacking players in the last few months, right? Like I think it's fair to say Anderson Julio has been better than Chicho over the last couple months. Mark Zook certainly has been. I think Diego Luna has been too. So who of those guys are you going to come off the bench out of that top 4? I look at what happened on Tuesday and think, probably a change needs to be made. There's not a great answer because Diego and Chicho haven't been playing well. And so I'm not exactly sure what I do if I'm Pablo. Again, I do think it probably involves Anderson Julio from the jump, but I don't have a ton of confidence in that necessarily breaking down Minnesota because of, like you said, they are a very good defensive team that is going to be pretty responsible and not necessarily let him get in behind, which I think is probably his best attribute as a striker.
All right, moving over now to the Jazz. Since you and I last spoke, just a horrific scene. And, the night, and several things are horrific, but let's start with the one involving the injury. The night the Jazz were in Dallas, there was a lot going on. There's football, there's baseball. I'm flipping back and forth, and suddenly in an instant, my phone just blows up, and it was all, did you see what happened to Taylor? So I switch over, I rewind, I watched it once. I do not want to see a replay, but just gutted for the kid because I do feel like he was showing signs of improvement and potential. So just give me your thoughts on the whole thing, your knowledge as of now as far as what the plan is, and does it change the calculus at all about what he can be eventually?
Yeah, look, I mean, it sucks. I was in the 3rd row in Dallas when it happened, and I'll be honest, I was watching the ball, not Taylor running down the court. I didn't see it happen live. I did hear kind of a scream, and I heard the crowd react, and I saw Taylor's leg in the sideways position in the way that no one ever wants to see that happen. It just sucks for the kid. Like, I do think you're right. Like, he had taken clear and obvious steps this year. Not that he was a world beater by any means and was in the starting lineup kind of to fill a role, not because he was like a starting caliber NBA player, but was on the path to being something useful and good. And now that will be delayed by probably about a year. The team still has to figure out when his surgery date is going to be and kind of what surgery in particular they're going to be doing, kind of how many of the ligaments can need to be repaired and so on and so forth. Like it's going to be a major surgery though. And it honestly reminds me a lot of Dante Exum 9 years ago where, had a, pretty raw rookie season, showed some flashes in his second year and then had that cut short. I guess Dante had his flashes in summer league and Taylor had his flashes in the first 3 games of the regular season, but it can be a huge deal for a player's development and production to have to miss a full year of development and growth. And so it is a significant bummer for Taylor Hendricks. I mean, it's devastating for the Jazz, who now no longer have anyone to guard the opponent's best player as well as Taylor did. It's as bad as news as a franchise like the Jazz can get, given that this year is all about player development and giving the young players time. Now they can't give Taylor Hendricks that time, and it just does suck.
All right, moving over just to the team overall, I am a huge fan. I love what I'm seeing. I'm going to order my Cooper Flag Jazz uniform when I get home, my Jazz jersey. Andy, I know it's a tough ask for the fans. It's a tough ask for the broadcasters. It's a tough ask for the coaches and players themselves, and it's a tough ask for team employees. But for me, 0-82, man. Like, I have no issue with this horrible start. The best time to do this would have been 2 years ago, as we saw first row last night. The second best time to do it is now. So tell me where you're at with this whole thing where it doesn't look like they're going to win a lot of games.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. I mean, it's funny after I think the last time I talked to you, or maybe it was OC, it was after the Memphis game. It was like, hey, they look kind of competitive, and then they have just looked incredibly uncompetitive over the last 4, where they're not even close to even, the San Antonio Spurs had only 1 win coming into last night and had not looked like a reasonable it's going to be a long year. It's going to be a year where we're focused on off-court things like the stadium, like the Delta Center, like, what's going on with the fan base, what's going on with TV contracts, so on and so forth. We're going to be watching young development. We're going to see if Keontae George is something or if he's nothing. We're going to see if Cody Williams can make any kind of impact on NBA games. We're going to see if Kyle Filipowski is a reasonable player or not. Like, there's going to be a lot of learning here, but the learning we've done so far is all pretty much in the negative direction. And that's valuable in its own right, but it's not promising. And so, yeah, it's a long season. I'm with you. I think it's probably the right move if you are trying to win a championship down the road. If you just want it to be playoff kind of competitive, I think there are probably easier ways to do that. But that's not what ownership wants. And I think that makes sense. I think, they want to deliver the first Jazz championship ever. And that probably requires a franchise-changing star that they don't have on the roster and don't have any other way to get besides this way.
So the question simply is this, and, as I talk about often, being on this side of the mic and knowing what it's like on the other side of the doors where decisions are made, there's always the message the front office delivers, then there's always the truth behind the scenes. And when you're losing intentionally, you say things like youth and you say things like development, and you do things like replacing Taylor in the starting lineup with other young players. So do you believe what we're seeing now in front of us is an intentional move by the Jazz?
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. Yes. I mean, look, and they say things on the record and then they say things off the record, and we know what look, it's we can use our own eyes on what's happening here. If the Jazz were trying to win games, Colin Sexton would not be on the bench. If they were trying to win games, Kyle Filipowski is not the replacement for Lauri Markkanen in the starting lineup, right? Like, you can just see what's going on in the decisions that are being, like, it's they don't want to win games. And it does suck like that's the current NBA incentive structure, and I wish that weren't the case, but yeah, they're trying to lose.
Yep. No, that's the deal. All right. So in the name of development and in the name of trying to understand if these young guys are actually growing, let's have a conversation about Keontae. And I'm not going to regurgitate the stats that I've been spewing all week, but I'll just summarize with 1 year of college basketball and 1 year of pro basketball and 5 years of his second year. It's pretty simple. He can't shoot. His field goal percentage is horrible. His three-point percentage is horrible. So at what point do we just simply become concerned about Keontae's growth and whether or not he can ever just simply be a guy that can make shots at a higher clip?
Yeah, I think it's completely fair. I mean, I think, and frankly, I guess the second point on that would be is if he can't shoot, he can't be an NBA player. Mm-hmm. Like, he can't get to the rim well enough. He's not a good enough passer and is one of the worst defenders in the league. So his only value is if he is a good shooter, and as you pointed out, the field goal percentages throughout his college and NBA career have not been good enough. I do think some of that is because of shot selection, and I do think like there's a world in which he trims it down and gets kind of makes the open looks and develops 2 or 3% and becomes a better player, becomes a better shooter where he is useful. Like I think there's like a George Hill without defense kind of angle there. I'm trying to come up with another player comp like Seth Curry. Maybe even there are backup point guards kind of in the NBA that make sense. But look, I was higher on Keontae coming into the year than this, and it's only been a week, and maybe it's just a terrible first week. But he has been the worst player on the floor in at least 4 of these 5 games, and there's some Trey Burke vibes here where, Trey Burke had a pretty good rookie year and then came into his second year and had the worst shooting percentage in NBA history for the 40 years previous, and pretty clearly showed that he was not an NBA player. And if Keontae doesn't turn it around, he's not an NBA player. He still has all the opportunity in the world. He's smarter than Trey Burke is. I think he's watches more film than Trey Burke did. I think he's more mature than Trey Burke was then, who had some kind of like unreported immaturity issues at that time. But like in the end, it's about how you're good are on the basketball floor. And he is not good enough right now if he continues to play this way to be in the NBA.
Are you surprised that you referenced Colin Sexton? Are you surprised that they've decided to put him on the bench and start Clarkson?
Again, what is the point of this? What is the goal of this team?
We're just doing radio, Andy. I've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah. Look, they're not trying to win. I mean, Colin is good enough to win games. I'll say this also, like Colin is dealing with a finger injury. He hasn't played that well off or on the bench this year. I don't think, I think Jordan maybe makes more sense as a 2 than Colin does, but I mean, it's all, they're just trying to get their young players in positions to succeed, right? Like, so they think Jordan's probably a better passer, maybe a better teammate to the young guys in the first unit, and then Colin can kind of drive action with John Collins and and Bryce Sensabaugh and blah, 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 so that you have like a semi-reasonable competitive second unit. But like, it's not, again, if you really wanted to win games, you would be playing Colin Sexton 35 minutes a night.
All right, man. I don't know. Walker Kessler's been kind of good, question mark,
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Kyle Filipowski's been good.
Yeah, yes.
Like, honestly, has been more NBA ready than I thought he would be. Has actually looked physical on the offensive end, has done some nice stuff passing, is not a great defender right now, but is honestly keeping up more than kind of the worry was. Both Kyle and Walker, I think, are the positive stories on this Jazz team. Other than that, it gets rough quickly.
All right. Before I set you loose, because I know you got to get to it, let's talk vibes. Let's for the Gen Zers and the millennials out there. I'm a results over vibes guy, but we know results are put aside. I was there on opening night against Memphis. The crowd was great. My buddy was there last night against the Spurs. He said it was very underwhelming, and I'm certainly not going to blame fans because this product is going to be horrible. But since you're there every night, how are the vibes? How's the crowd? And how do you think the team is holding up during this really difficult time?
Yeah, honestly, it's been fine. I think it's something definitely to watch moving forward. And look, we're in the first week of a really long season, right? Like we still have 77 more games of this. But I think the crowd has been, relatively into it. It was pretty empty at the beginning of last night's game, and then filled in more second and third quarter. It's also Halloween, so everyone has other stuff to do. Tickets are extremely cheap on the secondary market, right? Like you can buy tickets to sit in the lower bowl last night for $14. Like, so that being said, I do think even at that price, like fans are going to buy them and like kind of someone's going to probably sit in that seat and the arena won't look completely empty. And the players, like Lowry knows what's going on. Colin knows what's going on. He's just like, they are extremely well compensated to kind of deal with these kind of situations. So maybe the vibes I'm more worried about are from, say, like Walker Kessler and Keontae and Taylor, now that obviously he's had this catastrophic injury, like kind of the long-term pieces, and to see how they deal with losing and see how much effort and focus they put into their development. But so far, honestly, it's been fine. It hasn't been a problem. We'll get back to you in January and February when it really becomes dog days. But we're still, I guess it's November 1st now. It's still fine right now.
Fair enough, Andy. Appreciate the time, man. We'll let you get to it. Have a good weekend, and we'll see if the lads can get it done. Yeah.
No worries. Yep. Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
All right, Andy Larson covers the Utah Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune, writes a data column for them once a week as well. Get him on Twitter at Andy B. Larson, or Andy Blarson, as he likes us to say. A little behind the glass coming up. Neil Smith for some Utah Hockey Club. We'll bring in Zach Harper, get back to college football later on. Got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. So if you have always been interested in kind of traversing the space of gambling on sports, it can be complex and complicated with spreads and money lines and over-unders. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action because they've made it more accessible. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, it's really, really simple. All you have to do, we'll just use the Jazz Spurs last night as an example. Lowry Markkanen, more or less than 19.5 points. Chris Paul, more or less than 7.5 assists, stuff like that. You just pick over or under. And if you actually know the teams that are playing, you can win money. I've turned $20 of the promotional money they gave me into about $190 because it's not that hard to do. So this way you don't have to learn about all the crazy jargon. You just pick more or less on 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. They're giving away free money. You might as well go take advantage of it and see if you can make something out of it. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. A little hockey with Neil Smith coming up right here on ESPN 700. Do I sound sad to you today during the show? Like if you've listened, we've been on air for over 2 hours now. Do I sound sad?
I don't think so.
All right, Kayvon.
Not that I've noticed.
Kayvon, our old president, and does a lot of our voice work. He texted me and asked me if I needed a hug because he said I sound sad, and now I'm a little self-conscious of my tone and my energy.
Yeah, bring it up. Bring up the energy.
You know
It's
what?
Friday, bro.
I don't need to hear that from you. Okay, you said I don't sound sad, and now you're making me angry. I don't want to be sad and angry on a Friday.
It's a good combo.
All right, moving on. I'm never sad when our next guest hops on. Neil Smith, a little behind the glass style on a Friday. Neil, happy Friday, sir. How are you?
Happy Friday. I'm good. Day after Halloween, everything's good.
What does Halloween look like at the Neil Smith abode? Do you hand out candy? Do you attend Halloween parties? What does that look like?
Turn out the lights and hide.
Smart. Well, Neil, for a minute, Utah Hockey Club fans wanted to turn out the lights and hide. It has not been great as of late. They did get a win the other night against Calgary, and we saw some of that exciting offense that seemed to have slipped by. They won 5-1. They scored 16 goals in their first 3 games, and it hasn't been great as of late. They've lost 7 of 9. Kind of the same question as we asked you last week. Is this just going to be a club that is a little bit up and down as a result of the youth on the roster?
It is, and for that matter, every team goes through ups and downs during the season. You just try to keep the downs as minimal as possible and keep the ups as long as possible. But for Utah, I think they've had a pretty good start to their season, to be honest with you. I know they went through this little skid here where the 4-game losing streak, one of them was in overtime, of course, against 2 of them were in overtime, actually, LA and San Jose. But they are exactly where I've been saying that they would be, which is right in the wild card spot, fighting it out for the wild card spot. And with a little bit of help here and there, I think they're going to be okay.
Have no idea how to pronounce his name. I'm just going to give it a whirl. So the Red Wings have traded, I think it's Ali Mata or something like that. Probably not close, but he's been traded to the Utah Hockey Club. And Neil, as you and I discussed, whenever I would read like a preview for this team, they would talk about the issues last year on the defensive portion of the roster. And, it does feel like more often than not, Connor Ingram has asked to stand on his head. Do you know anything about this new defenseman that's been acquired, and do you think he'll help kind of plug the hole that's been left by some injuries and such?
Yeah, they have 2 big injuries there with Zerzy and Marino gone for almost the whole season. Hopefully not, but it looks like they could be. And so Bill Armstrong reached out to Detroit and was able to get Oli. It's pronounced Oli Mata.
Got it.
You were close. All
right.
And you know what? He's 30 years old, but he's been on Pittsburgh when they won the 2 cups. In 16 and 17. He is friends with Ian Cole because Ian Cole was there at the same time. So he's a good NHL defenseman. He's going to fill in nicely and do his job. I mean, it's good on the general manager that he was able to look around and find that. You've got to, when you see holes, you've got to plug them. And part of the reason why they went on that, that 4-game skid starting with Ottawa and then Colorado and LA and San Jose was because of the defensive lapses. And so I think Ali Mata will really help that.
Ali Mata. Okay, I'm writing it down. I wanted to get from your perspective as somebody who used to make transactions often, at what point, like in the NBA, we always say, okay, 20 games, which is typically, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, where you can actually really understand the tone and tenor of what the league is about. After how many games in pro hockey do you really feel like you have an accurate, idea of what your team is about?
You know what, Spence? I think that's true for hockey too. I think the 20-game mark is the quarter pole, and you've got a much better idea on how things are going. I mean, after 10 games, we could speculate on what's going on, but with injuries and different things can turn around after 10 games. I think the 20-game poll is a good benchmark to see where you're at. That's a lot of games, and that's similar, as you said, to the NBA.
So the road trip for the Utah Hockey Club starts tomorrow. It's a 4-game roadie. They're in Vegas to start things off. So what can you tell us about this club that we'll see tomorrow, and what do you make of the the Utah Hockey Club's chances. The Vegas Golden Knights are off to a really good start. They're 7-3-1. They've got 15 points overall. So give us a little preview of this game tomorrow night. What do we need to know about the Vegas Golden Knights?
It's going to be a great test for them because Vegas has got a real good team. They've got a better team than I thought they had. But Jack Eichel, number 9 on their team, is playing out. They're playing really, really well. And they're just a solid team all around. They're a plus 16 in goal differential. And goal differential means, of course, that you've scored 16 more goals than you've let into your own net. And they're playing very well. They had a good home and home with LA. They got they won in Vegas, and they lost in LA. So that was a real good rivalry there. But they're a good team. They're at the top of the Pacific Division, and they're there for a reason because they've started the season really good.
At this juncture, do you anticipate Bill Armstrong looking to make other moves? I mean, everybody, whenever the Utah Hockey Club is discussed, they talk about the clean books and the draft capital. It's a little bit like our NBA team. So makes the move to get the defenseman. Do you think he's analyzing anything else, or do you think he's just going to let this settle in and kind of see how it plays out?
No, you know what I think, Spence? I think you're constantly, as a GM in the NHL, you're constantly surveying and fishing and trying to find out what's out there, what could help your team, what other people want that you might be able to expend so that you can get something for your team that makes you a bit better. You know where your weaknesses are and where your holes are, and you're constantly, I mean, that's your job. You better be out there surveying the landscape of the entire league all the time, trying to improve the team. So I have no doubt that Bill Armstrong's trying to do that as he goes along during the season. And I think that the cap space comes into play when you get closer to the deadline and you decide whether you're going to be in or out, or you're going to be going for it or not. And that's when you can use that extra room.
Winnipeg continues to the other night I was flipping through some NHL games, and because they continue to be so dominant, I tuned in. They were at Detroit. They smoked them 6-2. This is a Central Division opponent of ours out here with the Utah Hockey Club. I'm just going to keep revisiting it as long as they're playing well. What stands out most to you?
Well, they've got a tremendous goaltender in Connor Hellebuck. He's won the Vezina last year, and he's on pace to win it again this year. Kyle Connor is shooting lasers as a forward there for goals, and they're just clicking on all cylinders. I mean, they're 9-1 and playing 900 hockey at the beginning of the season here. We talked about goal differential with Vegas. They're plus 22. They've already got 46 goals this season. So, you know what, they're clicking on all cylinders. And hopefully for Utah, they'll have an off night when they get them on Tuesday night in Winnipeg.
Obviously, Connor McDavid, if he's not the marquee name in the sport, he's one of them. What does this injury do for the Oilers, as it looks like he's going to be out maybe for a couple of months?
Well, no, he's not. He actually, believe it or not, somebody saw him skating the other day.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
They had said 2 to 3 weeks, but it might be less than that.
Good.
But nevertheless, Edmonton played the other night, played last night really, and played really well. Draisaitl stepped up, Leon Draisaitl. And Edmonton played really well. So, you know what? Sometimes when you lose your best player, the rest of the group really puts it in overdrive, steps up, and the team actually plays better for a spurt. Not that you'd be better in the long run, but in a short period of time, you get that little spurt because everybody's trying to make up for the fact that big guy's not there. I think they're going to do the same thing in Edmonton. Zach Hyman got his first goal of the season. He's a 50-goal scorer last season, and took quite a while to get his first one. So he got that. That's a big relief for the team as well.
Who are the other massive marquee star names? Because when I'm thinking, you know, Connor's among them, I feel like he is that guy in the league right now. Who else lives in that cul-de-sac?
You know, I think still that well, first of all, I got to mention Nikita Kucherov on Tampa. He's a tremendous player to watch. He's fun. He's really good. He's been doing it for a number of years now. He's still in his prime. He's a great goal scorer, but a fabulous passer. So Nikita Kucherov is one of my favorite players in the league. I think other superstar names, I still think Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin are still big names to watch in the league. Ovechkin getting 2 goals the other night. He's still trying to track down Gretzky and probably will this season. I think he's about 35 goals behind him for the absolute career high ever in goal scoring in the league. Sidney Crosby's team isn't very good, but they beat Anaheim last night 2-1 in overtime, and he scored both goals. So still playing really well for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and still a huge name in the NHL.
So I was thinking about this when I saw the rundown that you were going to be on today, because the names you referenced, these are all, high-powered scoring players. If you were to build a team from scratch, where would you start? Would you want a high-scoring attacking player? Would you want a great hot goaltender? What's the best way to go about building a team brick by brick?
Well, if you could build it, like if you walked into a store and everything was free and you could have your pick, I mean, you would want to start with the youngest, best players. And of course, Connor McDavid is right now is the league's best player, in my opinion, bar none. Connor Bedard is going to be a fantastic player. He's already great in Chicago, but he's going to be a league-leading player at some point. So you'd want to start with guys like that and build out from there. You need to have a great goaltender. But you know what? There's been teams now in today's era that have won without a superstar goalie. If you think back 2 years ago, Colorado Avalanche won it with Darcy Kemper in net. He's a good goalie, but not a superstar. Last year, Florida won the Stanley Cup with Bobrovsky in net, who was fantastic, but he's older. He's in his mid-30s. So I think I would start with a forward like Connor McDavid and build around him.
So I always keep one eye on the Rangers now because I have this bizarre, kind of not vision, but when I was watching the Utah Hockey Club, when I was watching a hockey team at Madison Square Garden play against the Rangers with Utah across their chest, it was so bizarre to me. What is going on with the contract stuff with Shesterkin? I read something like they made him a massive offer. He said no. Are they in danger of losing him? What's the latest there?
I don't think that New York's ever in danger of losing anybody if they don't want to lose him. I think with Shesterkin, he's trying to get the highest goalie contract ever and trying to be one of the highest paid players in the league. He is a fantastic goalie. There's no doubt that he's in the top 2 to 3 in the league. I mean, Hellebuck won the Vezina last year, so it's hard to say that Shesterkin's better than him, but Shesterkin is the backbone of the New York Rangers, and from what they say, they offered him, meaning what the media hype is, they offered him $11 million a year for 8 years, and he turned that down, which is hard to believe. And right after that, Jeremy Swayman, the starter for Boston, got $8.25 a year for 8 years. So we'll see where it comes out. But like I said, New York never loses anybody that they really want to keep. The problem's going to be, Spence, is with a cap system, how much can you spend on a goaltender and then take that out of the whole cap? And do you have enough left then for the rest of the team to make the team good enough to compete in front of that great goaltender?
Do you view the Rangers as legitimate contenders?
I think they are. I think they're contenders. I think they're a better regular season team than they are a playoff team the way they're currently constituted. I think they showed last year that they don't have the north-south game, meaning they don't forecheck hard and backcheck hard as like a Florida. But you know what? Anything can happen in the NHL, and as long as the Rangers are this strong, and they're going to get to the playoffs without any doubt, they're going to be one of the high teams in the playoffs, but they're going to have to make some changes before the playoffs come if they're going to advance in the playoffs.
So back to our division out here, the Stars at this point, I feel like Dallas it's not a surprise that they're highly thought of. I just have the latest power rankings up with this writer that I like to read. He has Winnipeg 1, and he has Dallas 2. And they're both in this division where we find ourselves. What do you like most about the start of the Stars? And tell us a little bit more about, what is expected of them the rest of the way.
Well, I hate to keep saying the same thing because you're going to think, well, all this guy does is say the goalie is great, but Ottinger is great for the for the Dallas Stars, and certainly when you've got that kind of goaltending, you're pretty good. You know, he's got a .917 save percentage, meaning that he stops 9.17 of every 10 shots, and a goals against of 244. So he's playing really well right now. Matt Duchene has had a rebirth again for them. I don't know, maybe the third time, playing really well for them. And then they've got some really good young players like Wyatt Johnson, who hasn't lit the place on fire right now, but he did in the playoffs. Jamie Benn is still a great captain for them. They're just a really well put together team. They've got good defense. They've got the right amount of offense, and they've got a real good goaltender.
Last thing, Neil, then we'll set you loose. And just based off of your experience around the game, and I'm not sure if you have experience with expansion teams per se, and this is not an expansion team, but it is a new team. And what we're seeing so far is the crowds have been mostly really good, but they've also been mostly very split. Like when the Avs were in town, a lot of Avs fans, the Bruins, ton of Bruins fans. And look, it's going to take some time, but I wonder, as somebody who ran clubs in the past, what you would say about what it takes to build a hockey club in a community and then have that community embrace that club as its own. Because if you go to a Jazz game, unless the Lakers are in town, because everyone loves the Lakers, they have fans everywhere, but it's typically 90-95% Jazz fans and, I don't know, 5 to 10% Bucks fans or whatever. What's the process entail for the new ownership group to kind of ingratiate the club into the community and have the community become Utah Hockey Club fans, not just hockey fans?
It's a good question, Spence, and I think it takes time, and it's a long game. You've got to play the long game. I think that winning solves a lot of things. If once the team is winning, then everybody wants to jump on the winner's bandwagon. But I think also grassroots programs, and I know by watching Utah on TV, they've got some grassroots programs started with the young kids. Now that, of course, is going to take time to develop young kids into fans coming into the building with Utah jerseys on. The issue here is that, you have people living in Utah that are hockey fans that had to cheer for somebody when Utah didn't have a team. So they were either Bruin fans or Blackhawk fans, Detroit Red Wings, whatever they may be. And that's in their heart as their real team. But as I saw with the Islanders, living in New York a long time, the New York Islanders were pretty much having fans from all the different teams until the late 70s, and they started to be a powerhouse and started winning. And then they had their own mecca of fans that, basically sold out the building because they were such a good team and they won those 4 straight Stanley Cups. That's not something you can do in this era, but that's a sign of what can happen in a market that hasn't had a team and suddenly gets one. It's going to take a while, but as long as they're competitive and they're winning and they're showing that they got a chance to be in the playoffs and make some noise, you're going to develop fans. And I think, too, people like Clayton Keller will develop his own circle of fans. He's an exciting young player. So I think that's going to really help.
All right, before we set you loose, tell our listeners where they can go find the pod. We got a lot of new hockey fans out here.
And I hope they go and get a free podcast preview of the league. We put it out 3 times a week called NHL Wraparound. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on every platform where you get your podcasts. And our goal is to inform you and give you information that you didn't have before. If you are a Utah fan, that's great. We'll tell you everything that's going on around the league. And we've got great guests. Last week, we had this week coming up, on Monday, we're going to have Bill Guerin, the GM of the Minnesota Wild, come on. We've had Don Maloney, the president of Calgary, on. We've had a lot of fun people on there, a reporter from the Pittsburgh Penguins letting us know what's going on there. So, you'll hear about all the different NHL teams, not just one, and it's called NHL Wraparound.
Neil, thank you, sir. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, look forward to it, Spence. Take care.
All right, the great Neil Smith, brought to you today by Overtime Cards and Collectibles, the best spot for all your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon card collecting. Buy all your favorites there and even take your cards in. Maybe you have some rare cards in your collection you don't even know about, like I did. So if you're around my age, chances are at some point, and you're listening to Sports Talk Radio, probably collected cards. Where are they now? Are they in your grandma's cellar, in your parents' garage? Mine were just in my basement, and I lugged them everywhere I moved for like 20 years, thinking at some point maybe there was some value. I took them into Overtime Cards and Collectibles. My guy Chris went through them, and he found a Kobe Bryant Fleer rookie card that I did not know I even had. So now that's on my mantle. I'm going to hold on to her for a while, maybe sell it at some point. So also start thinking about the holidays. What gifts you need to get for your friends and your loved ones. Why not an Overtime Cards gift card, the perfect stocking stuffer? They have all the best trading cards and collectibles around. Go check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. All right, time for Ryan from the Dish Pros. Cable television solutions, internet solutions, cell phone, wireless options too. Bottom line, you can save money if you make the call. 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
And it's not just a little bit of money; it's a lot of money. And this triple play stuff that we've got now is phenomenal, and it's amazing to me the difference we're helping. I mean, we know we can switch people with the TV side, $70 to $100+ a month. You get a huge upgrade, get the Hopper, biggest DVR out there, auto hops commercials, auto records your games for you. Plus you get movie channels, the multi-sports pack, and the NFL Red Zone, free for a year. But we've also added the Netflix offer. So this is actually really cool because we have the multi-sports offer free for a year, and we got Netflix free for 2 years. Guys, this is $370+ in your pocket. If you're subscribing to Netflix, which most of us probably are, it's something you can just, when you sign up, to be able to get that covered for the next 2 years. Now, guys, we start talking about the extra two things. Internet is kind of it's not no longer something that, it's an option. It's really a requirement. And a lot of the internet providers did a pretty massive rate increase, just like the cable and other satellite TV providers did rate increases. 20% rate increase is what we're seeing pretty close to with most fiber customers, especially. You probably don't even know about it, but your bill just went up. Listen, call us up. We can lower that bill. Plus, look at the wireless option. Because you can use the same cell towers you're currently using, switch providers. And the reason I'm saying that is Boost Mobile's got this new promotion where you get set up, you get a brand new iPhone 16 Pro or the new Samsung SC S, you get that free, and you'll probably be $30 a month that we're currently paying. What I mean by using the same cell towers as Dish and Boost Mobile are actually, as they build out their network, they're piggybacking on the biggest wireless network in America, and you're probably using those same cell towers. So you're just changing who you pay your bill to, getting a new iPhone, and spending $30 a line plus a month less. Easy. Call us 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, Zach Harper stops by. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. on a Friday. It's Friday afternoon, and this is, excuse me, this is what we're going to do on a Friday.
Listen, you can't put this on me.
Well, it'd be one thing if it was like Tuesday, but it's Friday. We only have 90 minutes left in the show, and you're playing Pitbull.
I know. Just getting the energy for the weekend, up to par.
All right,
it's a weekend song.
Let's bring in our resident Pitbull fan on a Friday. Zach, what are you doing? We're trying to get the weekend started out the right way.
One, I didn't request that this time.
Okay.
Two, I don't know if you saw, but Tom Haberstroh was Pitbull for Halloween and crushed it.
Nice.
Three, I know you are fighting an urge to tap your foot while that's going.
The head was bobbing a little bit.
Yeah, of course it is. It's Pitbull.
Yeah.
It's Mr. Worldwide, of course. And then number 4, I mean, that's just a good song. Like, how could you not want that right before the weekend? That gets me ready.
Gonna go ahead and disagree on number 4, but nonetheless, thanks for the time. What was your Halloween? The Zach Harper Halloween experience? There has to be something, yes?
Oh man, it was crazy, man. I watched some bad basketball, and then I watched some better basketball. Wrote a newsletter. Popped a gummy. Asleep by 11.
You didn't go out, huh?
No, man. On Halloween? No.
What about like last weekend? You strike me as a guy that likes to dress up. Am I wrong?
I like it if it is convenient.
Okay.
I like it if it is easy, if it's presented for me and easy. I'll really dress up almost as anything. Like I don't mind that. It's nothing about that. I don't want to have to go through a lot of effort. So no, the previous weekend, went out and everything, but not a Halloween flow for me.
Yeah, you know that you're getting old when you just use what you already have in the house. I think I was Iceman from Top Gun 7 straight years.
Perfect.
I didn't care.
Yeah.
It's easy costume.
Yeah, easy costume, and it's really like you just want to have fun. You want it to be as painless as possible, and then you just, you move on. You get ready for Thanksgiving.
Indeed. So you said you watched some good basketball and some bad basketball. I know you watched the Jazz and the Spurs.
Yeah.
What category does that fall under?
It was not good. Wemby was historically interesting, but I don't even. What's crazy about him last night is I don't want to say like, oh yeah, he had a bad game and had those numbers. He didn't, but he didn't seem like he had a great game, right? Like that's the one little concern I have for him going into this, or I guess after a week and a half of the season, is he looks just a little slow. He looks just a little. I don't know if out of shape is the right word, worn down. I don't know what it is. But he doesn't seem to be moving all that quickly as he was last season. So that's like really my only poor note about him. But yeah, that game last night was rough. I mean, all these Jazz games have been rough so far.
Well, and it appears, I don't know if you have made contact with the front office, but it appears they finally read the memo we sent them 2 years ago when we made them aware of Victor Wembanyama's existence, but they decided to go be fine and win 35 games. And then last year, same thing. But I am ordering my Cooper Flag jersey, Zach, and it appears that the best time to do this would have been 2 years ago. The second best time is now. It appears they're finally doing the thing that we all thought they should have done a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. And this is whether it's by accident or by, on purpose. Like, I don't think it really matters. What matters is that you get you get the franchise guy, right? Like that, again, that's really all that matters here. I get it. You got to sell tickets. You got to make the fans happy. What will make the fans happy if they're upset now? And I haven't really interacted that much, but I've seen Tony Jones's timeline, and Jazz fans seem to be like, what, like, this stinks. Like, this isn't fun. And I agree. It's not fun. You know what could be fun? 15 years of Cooper Flag. Mm-hmm. That could be fun.
Yeah, and, to your point about Wembanyama last night, I mean, it's hard to nap through a stat line like that, but Jazz fans with a front row seat of what the prize could have been 2 years ago. And I know there's no guarantees. Okay, every time I bring this up, right, I get the whole, DM or tweet like, hey, they're flattened. Thanks. I'm glad you read a Hollinger article and now you're smarter.
Yeah.
Like, I know Detroit went all in and they didn't get it. Atlanta had the 10th best odds and they got one. So there's no guaranteed path, but front row seat of what the prize could have been if they did it 2 years ago. But they didn't, and here we are. Tell me, Zach, and tell the listeners here, what are you hearing about Cooper Flag? In watching Duke basketball this year, as I'm encouraging Jazz fans to do, like, what are some of this? Because I don't do the scouting thing like I used to do on the level that I did once upon a time. What are the experts really saying about Cooper Flag right now?
I mean, I think the biggest thing with him is one, like he's a really good athlete, right? Like really, really good athlete, very active, and in a defensive way. Like I think defensively is where he is going to make his biggest impact. He has a pretty incredible instinct for where to be. He makes up for it when he misses out on those instincts. If he makes a mistake, he's still quick enough and long enough and athletic enough to make up for it. Offensively, I have plenty of questions about him offensively. I've kind of been comparing him. I know we're not supposed to do this, but it's been a cross-racial comparison. Like he reminds me of Sean Marion. And you may look at that and be like, that's not a franchise guy. Yeah, maybe not, but he also could develop in a very different way. I don't love his handle. I don't love his jump shot, but I do love the way he attacks on offense. He's very good off the ball. Defensively, he's just a monster. Like, I mean, maybe he's not the franchise guy. Maybe he's not Wemby. Maybe he's not, a Zion or whatever. He's going to be really good. And the great thing, if you miss out on him, there's an Ace Bailey, there's Dylan Harper, there's the big guy from Duke through the Sudanese kid. Like there's like 5 or 6 guys who could be this. And then, look, I know we don't want to stretch it out too much, and I know this could be frustrating, but 2026 is loaded too. Like that's an incredible draft class too. Like being bad in the next 2 years will set you up for success down the road.
There is some Jazz news I want to get your thoughts on for real, because since you and I last spoke, just a horrific scene in Dallas with Taylor Hendricks' leg snapping in half, poor kid. And what I will say is, both speaking to people over there than just watching with my own 2 eyes, bigger, stronger, came back in great shape, apparently had a great summer and stayed here a lot, and he and Keontae worked out together a lot. So we've seen, and I'm not going to, the dudes on the radio that walk people through the difference of the fibula and the tibula drive me crazy. So I'm not going to do that. What I will say is I know there's some variable between a guy like Taylor and a guy like Hayward or Paul George or Marquise Chris or Wes Matthews or what have you. We've seen injuries like this. He's 20 years old. That's great news. My guess is he'll heal and be fine. But what's the Zach Harper take on what this injury means for the potential future development of Taylor Hendricks?
I don't think I mean, yeah, he loses a year, right? And maybe a little bit more. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the timeline's going to end up being for him. But so that stinks. But for the most part, I liked him as a prospect coming out. I liked even the little we saw last year. I thought when he was on the court, he made an impact. And then this year, he looked good to start out the season, right? Like he looked very active. He looked very comfortable. It just sucks. Like I think he'll be fine long term. I'm not going to get into. I'm with you. Like I'm not going to get into like which bone was broken and what that means. It's modern medicine. It's like it's going to be. I think he's going to be fine. I really do. But it just sucks. Like he's such a talented young guy, and he's such a hard worker by all accounts. And I think he's going to be a really good role player for a very long time. He just needs to be healthy, and it's another blow to that.
So Sam Amick, former member of the NBA Daily Assist, and we still get him whenever we can, wrote a piece recently about some young players to watch out for as far as, potentially being traded. I know it's only November 1st. We've only got 5 games, but we're all just doing the thing where we talk about things that we hope you're interested in our thing. And Walker Kessler is one of the names that he brought up. I guess there was an Athletic report that the Lakers have interest in Walker, and he has been one of the very few bright spots so far for the Jazz. He's actually looked pretty good. He's rebounding with physicality. He's bigger. He's stronger. I don't think he's ever going to be like an 18-point a night guy. That's fine. He's back to really affecting rim percentage. He's blocking about 3 shots per game, and he does look bigger and stronger. He's young, and if the Jazz are willing, I'm certainly calling. What do you make of about what Sam wrote?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of teams who are just looking for, competent size with, and on player-controlled contracts that aren't outrageous yet. And Walker fits that perfectly. He's such a good rim protector. He's good around the rim offensively. He can do a little bit with the basketball. He could run some dribble handoff stuff with him. He's just a really good rebounder. I think a lot of teams will be interested. Now, I'm interested to see what the Jazz front office would expect back in return. I think we know Danny and Justin are pretty aggressive in what they want back just in general. So I don't know that there's any kind of imminent deal, but yeah, there were teams calling on him in the summer, as we heard, right? Like there have been teams that are very interested in him as soon as it looks like anybody on the roster could be available. The Jazz have been fielding calls. People have been putting that out there. I don't expect anything this year. I think it would be kind of crazy unless they were just blown away by an offer, but he's really good. Teams are going to want really good players.
Last Jazz thing, then we'll move on. And I know you and I have talked about this before, and I actually give you the credit for it because before they drafted Keontae, you referenced like, hey, the dude just doesn't really know how to make shots very well. And he still doesn't. It's been almost 3 years. And if you average out the splits between college, rookie, and the first 5 years, I mean, it's really like 34% from the floor and like 29% from three. Like I know he's young. I know he's a kid, but he has shown now for almost 3 straight years of playing basketball. He is a basketball player that's not good at shooting the ball into the basket, which could be an issue. At what point should Jazz fans be legitimately concerned about this?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I think by the end of this season, if it still looks the same way, yeah, then I would be concerned. First 2 years for a guy, especially, I think there's so many pluses with him. Like, I know he had a bunch of turnovers yesterday, but he's got a really good feel for the game, and I like the shots that he takes for the most part. It's not like he's just chucking up bad shots all the time. I think he understands how to play. I don't know what that difference is. I don't know if he needs to be stronger as he goes to the basket. I don't know if he needs to be quicker in terms of how he gathers into his jump shot. I don't know what that balance is, but everything looks good to me except it clangs off the rim, right? And so I think by the end of year 2, I mean, I kind of approached the whole Scoot Henderson thing the same way. I get it. He doesn't make shots. He's been okay the last couple of games, but I just look for the process of how they get to those shots. At a certain point, 2 years in, end of 2 years, you should be making at least a decent number, and it's troubling that he has gotten out to such a poor start now because I would imagine that gets into his head a little bit. I still like the way he plays. I don't know if that's just me being stubborn about him, but if he's still shooting this way in December, then I maybe figure out what you need to do. If he's still shooting this way definitely in March or April, okay, now that seems to be a big problem.
Most teams have only played 4 or 5 games. I mean, we don't know anything about anything as of now. But of all the teams that you thought would be decent, they're off to a bad start. Which team stands out the most, and why is it Milwaukee?
That's because, you know what, I've got to say, this is zero reporting. This is just me being chaotic. Well, I will say this. We heard things towards the end of last season that maybe Monty Williams wasn't dying to keep that job in Detroit, right? He has this massive contract. He was a horrible coach last year. It went beyond the talent. Like, his decisions were atrocious. And a lot of people wondered if he was, maybe tanking his own job because of the money coming in. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just the conversation that was being had. There's part of me that thinks Doc Rivers looked at that and said, I could do that. I could get that done. Like, Chris Middleton is fantastic. He shouldn't be the difference between them getting blown out by 30 in Memphis and being a title contending team or even just a good team. Like, they have the talent, they have the players. This is good enough. I don't know what isn't clicking. It's not like Dame and Giannis have just been bad to start the season. There is just something where it doesn't work. And it's too early to say they've got to blow it up. It's too early to say any of that. But the fact that you're already getting those Giannis comments and those Giannis like, well, maybe he does want to get traded after the end of this year. And whether it's true or not, those things seep in. And I really thought Milwaukee was going to come in this season and establish like, hey, we were supposed to be this team last year. We are this team. We're going to do this. Now, like 5 games in, I'm ready to just write them off. And that's crazy. You shouldn't do that 5 games in.
Well, look, I will admit to potentially being blinded here because Doc was a Knick in the 90s, and that was my team.
Yeah.
But you, from my seat, you've kind of always been like either lukewarm or entirely out on him. Is that fair?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't think he's a bad coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. Like, I think he can help a good team remain good. I think he caught the perfect storm with Kevin Garnett being super underrated when he got moved from Minnesota there. And I think Kevin Garnett did a lot for Doc Rivers and did a lot for Paul Pierce. Like, I just do. I think he was the reason that team was great. I know Paul Pierce got the Finals MVP. Don't care. Like, KG ran that team and sacrificed in the way you want. And ever since then, I mean, look, JJ Redick can be salty about things and have a bad perspective or a biased perspective. I think a lot of the things that he brought up when he was an analyst on ESPN, throwing Doc under the bus, I think there's some validity to a lot of that. I think it was maybe a little harsh and unfair at the same time, but there's a lot there. Like, he's a smart basketball guy. He knows the game. I don't doubt any of that stuff. At the same time, I have a real problem. This has really like come to form the last couple of years, and it mostly has to do with Daryl Morey, but I do think Doc Rivers is in that same vein of when you are doing nothing but making excuses for why something isn't your fault. We weren't healthy. The refs did this, all this stuff, right? I think you set up a culture of excuse making that is not conducive to competing for a championship. We saw that with the Clippers. We've seen that, in Milwaukee early on. Like, there's just always a reason why it's not his fault or it's not their fault. And I don't think that is the proper way to build a winning basketball culture.
Speaking of Redick, have they lost a couple straight, but they got off to that 3-0 start. So every time I turned on ESPN, there was a big Laker thing because that's the deal. Is there anything real about what Redick has done that makes them look different and better in your mind?
I mean, they just look like they want to play for him. And I know that sounds very cliche and very vague, but, he talked a big game about, upping their three-point volume, all this stuff. That doesn't really happen. Like, they're shooting the same amount of threes as they did under Darvin Ham. But there is a different energy. Maybe that's just the start of the season. They seem more organized. They're running some cool stuff out of timeouts. They've got some good sets. They're using guys. They've unlocked AD a little bit more. It looks good. I still want to see what does it look like if they lose 4 or 5 in a row, right? And maybe we're about to see that. I don't know. But I do think he's an upgrade. I don't know if he's the fix. But so far, I think the results are really good.
It's not Milwaukee, but look, I always draw the parallel because NFL people would talk about like the Colts just wasting Andrew Luck. And after 7 years, Andrew Luck was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And Jokic has a ring. It's not like they haven't done anything with him, but are they in danger? Because whenever I lock in on Denver and watch him, I'm just like, he's still the best in the world. And I don't know that it's close right now, to be honest. Is Denver in trouble at this point of potentially wasting the final 4, 5, 6 years of this type of play from Jokic?
Absolutely. They got cheap. And look what it looks like, right? I don't think it's as doom and gloom as it seems, but, the reason they're in the win column is because they had to work hard to go to overtime against Toronto and Brooklyn. And Jokic took over, and Jokic was great because Jokic is great. He is the best player in the world. It's not close. But there is a concern of burning him out. I don't know what to think about the whole he may walk away stuff, right? Like we keep making this joke. We know he loves horse racing. People seem to think he doesn't love basketball. I think he loves basketball. I don't think he loves the NBA, but I think he enjoys his job and how he plays. I think he's a crazy competitor in that way. But I mean, is Michael Porter Jr. good? Is Jamal Murray good? Is Aaron Gordon, a guy who should be third most important player on the team? All that seemed very easy to justify and very easy to say yes to all those things when they won the championship. But we see they lose a little bit of depth, and this is how it looks. I mean, it's too early to write them off, but would it shock you if they were just a play-in tournament team this year?
No. I mean, are you saying in 3 years Jokic is going to be with the Basketball League of Serbia averaging 70, 40, and 25?
Wouldn't that be so fun?
It would be awesome.
That would be so fun. I mean, I want him to be in the NBA as long as he can be because he's just a historic talent. But I do kind of want to just see him go to some random Serbian league and just average 80.
Yeah, no, that it would be entertaining, and it would hopefully send a message to the rest of the league. Like, you can't waste a guy like that. Last thing, Kenny Atkinson. It's kind of interesting looking at the splits between the Cavs and the Warriors. They're both playing 13 players, 15 minutes a game. Maybe it's the new thing, but the Cavs, I was a little skeptical, but they smoked the Lakers. They beat the Knicks. Are you buying this 5-0 start?
I'm buying them in the regular season. But I've always bought them in the regular season, right? Like I don't think coaching was the problem last year. I don't. They had a bunch of injuries. I think JB Bickerstaff did a great job of managing those injuries, getting them through the regular season. I think they have a roster construction problem when you get down to 7-game series and just playing playoff basketball. Now they're still really good. I think the encouraging thing and what you and maybe this was always going to happen. I don't know that's fair to put on JB, but Evan Mobley looks like a monster, right?
Yep.
Evan Mobley looks unbelievable. It's early, but he looks so good. And so it's good that their offense has been so good. I actually think they have the best offense in the NBA through a week and a half, whatever that means. They did open against, Toronto and Washington and Detroit. So 2 good wins against the Lakers and the Knicks. I'm not trying to downgrade that, but we got to see a little bit more before I'm just like, yeah, they figured it out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Thanks for the time. Have a good weekend. We'll chat soon.
Dolly, appreciate it.
There he is. All right, he had to go there. All right, we'll get back to some college and pro football in the 5 o'clock hour, but let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros on this Friday afternoon. If you're looking at your budget, feeling like it's a little tight, you can save money and use that money to pay your bills. Cable TV, wireless options, internet as well. What's going on, Ryan?
And this is a pretty amazing deal we've got right now. And, if you combine this with the offers with TV and internet and wireless phone service, guys, we're talking about $6,000-$7,000 for the next couple of years. It's unbelievable. It just can't. It's such a cool thing. I've never had the ability to save customers this much money, and it's pure and simple. We all watch the same TV. You just can watch it from different places. Guys, here's the thing. You set up with Dish, pay less than your current provider, get the biggest, fastest DVR, huge upgrade. We'll throw in movie channels, multi-sports pack, and the NFL Red Zone free for a year. That's a decent upgrade by itself. But how about this? How about Netflix? Most of us use that. It's like $15-something a month. For 24 months, what is that? Like $370+ dollars? Guys, let's do that free for 2 years. And so if you switch to Dish, you just use the same stuff to pay less, get a better equipment. How about internet? Same thing. You can actually have your fiber bill just probably went up 18-20%. You can actually lower your fiber bill on using the same fiber. Just pay a different provider. Save 20% right there, some extra money. And the best one is actually wireless. Boost Mobile is building out the most advanced wireless network in the nation. And as they're building out this network, they're actually piggybacking on all of the cell towers of the biggest wireless provider in the United States. You probably know who they are. Starts with the alphabet. And you might be using that same service. So you switch to a different provider, pay a different bill, use the same cell towers, and get a nice free, and I'm going to say it, free iPhone Pro or 16 Pro, or the Samsung, I think it's the SC or CS, I think it was. You get that one free, and you'll spend, and we're seeing it, like $30+ a month less than what you're currently paying. Because if you're a family of 4, family of 5, just figure that, do the math really quick. That's a ton of cash. And so call us up. Just see what we can do for you. We can upgrade you to new equipment, free phones, free iPhones, no trade-in, by the way, on the iPhone deal. Plus, if you call and say and get set up, we'll throw a dinner at JCW's. It's never been easier. So the hardest part is just calling 424-DISH. Call us now, 801-424-DISH.
All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The Drive at 5 is next, right here on ESPN 700. Do you have a friend? I know you have a friend. I know you have several friends, but is there
2 or 3?
Okay, out of the 2 or 3 friends that you have, because my buddy just sent me an Instagram reel. Oh, by the way, my mother just learned how to send Instagram reels, and it's
That's always great.
love you, Mom, but I don't need 11 when I wake up, and then another 10 before I go to bed. But my buddy just sent me this video of a friend who was filming his friend playing golf, and the whole ethos of the video is, I have one friend who is a horrible golfer, but every time we go golfing, he plays horribly, and he's angry the whole time because he thinks
Right.
But I probably played 50 rounds with him, and I've never seen him play well. Yet he's angry the whole time that he's not playing better. It'd be one thing if I had seen one decent round. It's like, oh, you can't do that. But he's only bad at it, and he's mad because he thinks he should be playing better. Do you have a friend like that?
Probably. Probably me.
All right.
No,
Do you get angry on the golf course?
not really.
Not worth it.
But that's just because I've been there. I've worked the golf course. I've done the game enough. I've been around the game enough to know if you want to have fun, you don't try to be good. If you want to try to be good at golf, you have to dedicate your entire life to it, and then maybe you're kind of good, like approaching par. If you don't, then just go have fun.
Even pro golfers don't think they're good at it. But I got a kick out of the video because I feel like we all have that one friend who sucks at golf, yet he's angry every time you play with him because he thinks he should be better, yet he's never played well.
It's a frustrating game. I get it.
It
But yeah, no expectations, and you'll have more fun.
All right, happy Friday. Drive at 5 on a Friday afternoon starts right now. Your commute home on a Friday afternoon, well, hopefully it started earlier, but if it's starting right now, thanks for making us a part of it on this cold and chilly, cloudy Friday afternoon. Drive at 5 today is brought to you by LHM Ford, powered by the Larry H. Miller in Draper, the Ford King. Oh, the Drive at 5 today powered by Larry H. Miller in Draper, the Ford King. Utah's #1 volume Ford dealer, and will beat any trade-in price in town by $750 anytime, any day. Find us online at lhmforddraper.com. Going to do some college football coming up. Max Brown will join us. Even though it is a bye week for Utah and BYU football, a lot of interesting games coming up in the world of college football, and some will have potentially a direct effect on what happens in the Big 12. As we talked about a little bit earlier, this Iowa State-Texas Tech game is a little bit sneaky. Now, I'll totally admit to being unaware of this because oftentimes we just end up saying cliche things about teams, whether or not it's true. And, Porter, what do you hear about Iowa State? When people that cover Big 12 football and people that are analyzing Big 12 football, when Iowa State pops up, what do people just generally say about them?
It's hard because it's a team that I don't want to say is the plucky punching above their weight because they're so consistent, but it just seems like they've never been able to capitalize on that in the way that gets you like national notoriety, that gets you a big bowl game. They've had their moments, but for me, Iowa State is a team that you always know is going to be fairly well coached. They're going to run an offense fairly cleanly. The defense, as you mentioned, is a little lopsided this year, but they always have a solid defense, and it's just a program that doesn't make a lot of mistakes that are going to beat them, and always a little bit limited by their recruiting footprint, by their resources on campus and whatnot. But it's kind of what we see out of Iowa State. Maybe a team that looks at Utah as something they would like to be if they can just get a little bit more on the edge of exposure and whatnot in that direction.
So the weekend in the Big 12, there's no Utah, there's no BYU, there's no Colorado. So the teams that, well, certainly from a local standpoint, are the most interesting are not in action. But in Ames at Jack Trice Stadium, we have Texas Tech and Iowa State. And as I was reading to prep for the show and prep for the Big 12 weekend, I was surprised to learn that Iowa State is the 99th rated rush defensive team in college football, right behind Bowling Green and right ahead of UMass, two very unserious football programs. A lot of that was because of the UCF game, because UCF essentially should have beat them. Texas Tech is one of, if not the highest powered offenses in the Big 12 this year. Now, They're coming off a couple of losses to Baylor and TCU, but they hung 34 on TCU. It was on the road, and they probably should have won that game. And they hung 35 on a very improved Baylor defense. And this line to me really stands out. I think Iowa State is getting way too many points at 13.5, and the over-under is 56.5. So Iowa State's lack of the ability to stop the run, and if you're a BYU fan, of course, you're watching this game. Iowa State and BYU are the final two undefeated teams in conference play. BYU's 5-0. Iowa State is 4-0. And as a result of a bye week that Iowa State had, they have BYU has in soccer what's called a game in hand. So we'll see if Iowa State can match that 8-0 and 5-0 record. But if Iowa State gets got this weekend, the path is there for BYU. Now, from a Big 12 standpoint, as we talked about yesterday with Danny Cannell, right now there's this conversation in college football. Which conference has a better chance at getting two teams into the CFP? Is it the ACC or is it the Big 12? And there's an interesting dynamic in the ACC because they actually have 4 ranked teams, and SMU and Pitt are going to play this weekend, so that will lead to one loss for one of them. Of course, if you're BYU, you continue to you continue to pull for and cheer for SMU to play well because that win looks so much better week in and week out, and Pitt's undefeated. There's actually a couple of games this weekend that really affect what will happen moving forward with Brigham Young and SMU. Pitt, one of them. Miami's undefeated, but Clemson, after that Georgia loss, has turned everything around. They might have the best D-line. Certainly one of them. They have the best D-line in the ACC, one of the best D-lines in the country. And so the ACC appears to be heading towards potentially getting 2 teams in. If I had to guess right now, and look, there's still 4 clean teams. It's a little bit like the Big 12. If I had to guess right now, it should be Clemson and Miami. Miami is one of the few undefeated teams in college football. The ACC has 2 undefeated teams overall, 4 in conference play. SMU is 7-1. Of course, their only losses to Brigham Young. Pitt is 7-0, and they're 3-0 in conference. Miami 8-0, 4-0 in conference. But Clemson 5-0 in conference, 6-1 overall. And their only losses to Georgia, who a lot of people think still is the most talented team in all of college football. And on the Big 12 side of things, it's a little bit similar. But if you're a Big 12 fan, which I'm not, as you've heard me say, to me, this is about your individual program. If you're not in the SEC or the Big 10, this is about you auditioning as a potential program or product to kind of get the invite when it comes, even if it's not for a few years. But if you're a Big 12 fan and you're hoping for 2 teams getting in, the way to cheer for that now is BYU and Iowa State to stay clean and then face each other in the Big 12 championship game because they don't face each other in the regular season. So if you're cheering for that, you're certainly looking for Iowa State to get the win over Texas Tech. If you're a BYU fan and you only really give a rip about what your team does, it would be nice to see Iowa State lose because ultimately that makes your path a little bit easier. So Big 12, somewhat interesting this week, but with no BYU, no Utah, and also no Colorado, a lot of attention is elsewhere. The Fox Big Noon game will be Ohio State, Penn State, Happy Valley, and Beaver Stadium. Ohio State is a 3-point favorite there. Both Ryan Day and James Franklin have struggled playing top 5 schools throughout their tenure. So college football weekend ahead should be a good time, even though next week is kind of what we're all pulling for in the rivalry game with Utah and BYU. Some news broke today, Porter, that we haven't talked about. Kyle Whittingham joined a fledgling radio station somewhere and announced that Sam Heward is lost for the year. I don't know where he said that, but I just saw it on social. Hopefully it went well for them. Did you have any knowledge of this, and does it explain? Because I'll take our listeners back to the offseason. You and I had several debates about, okay, what's the contingency plan for Utah football in the event that Cam Rising goes down? What does it look like, okay? I think we're all on the same page that last year it wasn't good enough, and I always remind everybody that Brandon Rose also went down, but Brandon was healthy this year. Job was not his. Maybe it will be moving forward. And so we talked often like, okay, you follow the transfer portal, all these really good – I'm not saying they were going to get Dylan Gabriel, but all of these really good quarterbacks, upperclassmen quarterbacks, transferring to find new places to play. Would Coach Witt and Coach Ludd, who, thinking about you, Andy, hope you're doing well, no longer here. He's still alive. He's just not the offensive coordinator. Would they go grab one of these guys? And then it's Sam Heward. You read his pedigree. You're like, oh, top 3 kid in his class?
Right.
Didn't work out at UW, but then he goes down to JUCO, looks pretty good. Does the injury news broken on a fledgling radio station earlier today, does that explain maybe a little bit why we haven't seen Sam at all?
I would say it explains recently why we haven't seen Sam Heward, but Sam was healthy early in the camp process. He was healthy as the season kicked off. Now, I do think there was something to Andy Ludwig and the coaching staff wanting Sam to be in that offense for a year or so and to be comfortable with the intricacies of Ludwig's offense. So I think they kind of just planned on him being a watcher this season, right? That was the plan. Obviously, you planned on Cam Rising being under center as well. But once that went south, I do think there was a couple of opportunities where it wasn't working with Isaac Wilson. And we obviously saw Brandon Rose and no Sam Heward. And to my knowledge, Spence, some of that was before the injury. So we still didn't see him in some of those moments. I know there was hesitation to pull Isaac. I know there was hesitation to pull Cam at points when you maybe could have. But there were opportunities, is what I'm saying. If Isaac Wilson's out there playing hurt and you don't feel comfortable enough going to a Brandon Rose or when he was healthy, a Sam Heward, that just points to the bigger problem we've been talking about since you said since this offseason. And the thought around Sam Heward is, again, that he was going to be in observe mode this year and then potentially be able to compete for that job with Isaac and Brandon in 2025. But now he's obviously got a little bit of a delay, and I'm not sure what's going on there because it did sound like it was before the injury. He wasn't really part of the plan on the field either.
And as we know, as of now, between, Monday and next Saturday, it will be Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose splitting the reps with the ones. And we will find out who the quarterback is going to be. Excuse me. Probably when the offense runs out for its first possession against BYU. We know the deal. Kyle thinks that gives him a competitive advantage, so you do you. You're the head coach. All right, little jazz here before we catch a break. As I've talked about throughout the show, and I'll continue to talk about, I know that it's frustrating. They're 0-5. They're really bad, and I'm really juiced. For the first time since the decision to pivot away from Mitchell, Gobert, Bogdanovich, Conley, O'Neal, I could keep going, Quinn Snyder deciding that he didn't want to coach this team anymore, Dennis Lindsey deciding he didn't want to work for this group anymore. For the first time since the last pretty successful and fun iteration of Jazz basketball, I think there's hope. But it's going to suck for a while. And I know that's hard. And I know it's a tough ask of a fan base. I know it's a tough ask. Look, it's tough on players and coaches. Like, penny for Will Hardy's thoughts, honestly. And I know that he has options picked up for both next year and year 5. So they're basically saying just ride with us. And my guess is, because look, if you want a little truth serum on a Friday, this team is not 2 years away from being even decent. Barring something that nobody sees coming. It has to be a slow, arduous, brick-by-brick process. We have some examples going on around us. The best one is OKC. The problem with the OKC example is the player that they received in return in exchange for trading their star, Paul George. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is like a top 5 guy. And the biggest prize the Jazz received in exchange for either Gobert or Mitchell is Lowry, who, with most of the NBA ranked stuff, is somewhere around 25 to 30 as far as, where he exists in the pantheon of players in pro basketball. They do not have a cornerstone building block. Markkanen is not one of those. He's really good, and he can certainly be part of the next iteration of the great Jazz team if they go about this the right way and if they get a little luck. Now, the little luck has to come in the form of lottery, either their own or maybe they get some luck with the Cavs pick or the Wolves pick. Cleveland's 5-0. Minnesota's thought to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league. My guess is, remember, the Jazz have a top 10 protected pick of their own, so if it's out of the top 10, it goes to OKC. But it very much looks like it's going to be in the top 10 and potentially even higher. Now, that's where the luck comes into play. Detroit has gone all in on being bad. They did not get the number 1 overall pick last year. Atlanta had the 10th best odds. They move up to number 1. But this is a draft where you want a high pick. Hopefully it's 1, but if it's top 3 or 4, most people that study the draft believe that's enough to get you a really, really good young player. and all due respect to Keontae, like, where are you guys at with Keontae right now, right? He had some good moments last year, but so far it hasn't looked great. Taylor's the one that I'm super excited about. We're not going to see him for a year at least. It's got to be this way. And I know that sucks, and I know it's hard, and I know the building's probably going to be start to empty out, and I know the fans aren't going to be as invested and excited. But in the name of the long game and how you have to build a team here with pro basketball, the best time to have done this was 2 years ago. The second best time is now. All right, we'll preview the college football weekend ahead, and we'll talk a little Utah and BYU football coming up next with Max Brown before we say goodnight at 6 right here on ESPN 700. Am I to understand we are sending our listeners into their weekend with a live airborne toxic event track played right here in this very building?
You are not mistaken.
Wow.
Yes, they did a little X96 event, apparently. The X Lounge. Lounge X.
All right.
Lounge X. And so we've got live from our cantina, our lunch spot, Airborne Toxic Event.
All right. Well, we learned about them via the hippest NBA beat writer out there in Howard Beck. I got to say, I like their sound.
Yeah, they're good.
Might have to
They're
check
good.
them out. All right, Utah on a bye week, but it's like 35 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm considering trying to go play some golf tomorrow, like noon.
It's supposed to be like 55, maybe.
And
Should
that's
be
why I
a
want to
little
wait
nicer.
until noon. I have a tee time at 9.
Mhm.
That's a little early. So I might push it back until like noon. What do you have? I mean, I know you like to escape when it comes with the Utah bye week, but it's a little chilly to get super weird. So what's the weekend looking like?
Yeah, good question. The plan is always to try to explore a little bit. I'll get outside. I'll go for a run or bike ride outside at some point. But nothing out of the ordinary in that regard. No big trips. No mountains to climb or anything planned in that direction. So we'll take it easy. We'll catch up on the college football. I do when Utah has a bye, Spence. That is the one time where like I can sit down and do the college football thing on a Saturday, right? Where I'm not setting up my table for pregame show and missing all of the games that I want to watch. Not that I don't want to watch Utah, but you know what I mean. Not missing all the top 25 matchups and the Hokies and all the like. That's probably what my Saturday will look like, and we'll go from there.
Last thing before we say goodnight. Have you ever participated in like all the stuff that happens in November, like the no shave November, like the no booze November?
Not really.
Yeah. Seems like November 1st, I see the same people posting pictures on social and they're cleanly shaven.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, hey, it's no shave November. Make sure to take care of your mental health. And I've never been like, oh, my buddy Steve is clean shaven. I should take care of myself better.
Right.
I respect the endeavor. Maybe I'm just immune to it.
Yeah, maybe, I understand and appreciate the ode to, doing something and the symbolism behind it, but I've never really needed it in that way. I'll shave I'll grow my beard out and look scraggly without the impetus of No Shave November, so you don't have to really ask me twice.
All right. Well, take care of yourselves out there, whether you have a beard or you're clean shaven. Respect the endeavor.
Either way.
Yeah, it's all good.
Shave, no shave.
Indeed.
Whatever.
All right. What comes our way on a Monday edition of the show?
On a Monday edition of the program, we'll catch up with our friend Josh Furlong, of course, AP voter here in the market. Back to Utah football action over the weekend. Tom Haberstroh for the NBA Daily Assist. Bill Riley will stop by the program. He may stop by Tuesday, still working out the details on that one. And to finish off the show on a rivalry Monday, the head ball coach from Brigham Young University. It's Kalani Sitake. We're hoping for Kyle on Tuesday, but we're starting on a Monday. Kalani Sitake will join the program and hoping for both of the head ball coaches on a rivalry week.
Really excited for next week. It's one of the best weeks on the sporting calendar, maybe the best week. And hopefully for Utah fans, you're keeping that hope alive. And hopefully for BYU fans, your magical season has a chance to continue. I say it all the time. It's better for all of us when both these teams are good. And I still think Utah football is good. Maybe I'm crazy. All right, that'll do it. Special thank you. Max Brown, Howard Beck, Andy Larson, Neil Smith, and Zach Harper. That's a lot of sound. If you have time this weekend, listen to whichever part of it you'd like to. You can do that on our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. You can download our app. It's the ESPN 700 app. You can always get all the sound from my show, Sean's show, on ESPN700sports.com. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. We'll talk to you on a Monday drive. You can always find it right here